Chapter 301. This exercise is just like a math problem. I can either learn by rote all the equations, or I can understand the underlying principles of the main formula and derive from it everything I need. So far, the first method failed me. Time to give the second one a try. Lith closed his eyes, ignoring the combo bar in front of him and focusing on his mana core instead. The second spell of his choosing was Joran Bat, a useless spell that would generate coin-shaped icicles. It was similar enough to the previous one to make it possible for him to at least reuse the first-hand seal. Lith drew the symbol in the air slowly, feeling a small amount of mana departing from his core. Then he almost stopped his hands, making one small movement at a time and observing how the mana strand reacted. He discarded all the signs that caused it to bloat or collapse, following only those which made it move outwards. Lith had no idea how much time had passed when he heard the sound announcing the completion of the second spell. He opened his eyes just for the time necessary to pick the next two words from the codex and transmit them to the booth. He kept practicing ice spells only, observing each time with more clarity the shape the mana strand assumed with each different spell. The revelation struck him like a hammer. Most of the movements composing a single hand sign were useless. They had likely been added to make it easier to remember, to mask the important parts from prying eyes, or both. What mattered were the movements that altered the shape of the mana strand, adding to it twists and turns until its flow resembled that of a true magic spell. Lith decided to put his theory to test. He picked another couple of words, forming a simple ice spell. Lith mentally visualized how he needed to manipulate his mana flow to obtain, with true magic, the same effect the fake spell would have. Next, he pronounced the magic words while using both hands to shape the mana strand like the true spell he just created. The booth signaled his success, coincided with the gong marking the end of the lesson. Lith found himself drenched in sweat. His mana reserve was low enough to give him a splitting headache. Yet he was pleased with his results. The bad news is that I can't use the same technique for higher tier magic. It takes me a minute to whip up a tier 1 true spell, but the same can't be said for the upper tiers. It means I must really learn how to create fake spells. Lith thought. This not only will come in handy to pass this subject, but also as a way to obtain credits by sharing spells if I ever need something from the association. The good news is that now I found a much quicker way to turn fake magic into true magic and vice versa. It seems my original theory was right. Fake magic's foundations are the same as true magic, and the whole tier system is a ladder that leads to the discovery of the mana core. Lith walked out of his booth, waiting for the hologram to project his results. Attempted spells, 15. Completed spells, all. Final grade, B. Imprint successfully reset, ready for a new student. Not bad for someone who spent half the lesson to get a single spell right. Solus tried to cheer him up. He was the lowest score they ever got, yet she was proud of him. Lith had achieved that grade all by himself, without asking her help. It's better to wait after dinner before asking him if he did it on purpose, or he was simply so focused to forget about me. She thought in a hidden corner of her mind. Lith turned to watch how the others performed. Quilla's hologram reported. Attempted spells, 22. Completed spells, all. Final grade, A. Amazing as always, Quilla. I suck so bad at this subject. I need to work harder. He shook her hand with a tinge of envy in his voice. She's more talented than me, has more experience than me in creating fake spells, and she didn't waste time panicking. I wonder how powerful will she be, Ko? Lith's train of thought was interrupted by Quilla, who gave him a weak kick on the shin. The way she compulsively tilted her head made him think Quilla was having a stroke or something. Turn around, idiot. Lith followed Solus's order, finally noticing the other stations too. There were a lot of holographic DS, ES, and even some FS. What the heck? Lith blurted out. It required at least 4 completed spells to get an E, 8 to get AD. Everyone was staring at him with pure hatred. I told you people talent. Nailier patted their backs. As I said earlier, 2 completed spells are enough for a passing grade during the first lesson. The machines are calibrated for the final exam, though. She chuckled at his bewildered expression. Later, while the students were enjoying their dinner, the traitor inside the academy could finally sigh in relief. After the streak of failures during the past year, all their meticulous planning was giving its fruits. Based on their most recent intel, Linjos was still unaware of their plans to build military-grade weapons to employ during the final act. Ever since they had joined Lookhart's wild goose chase, everything had gone south. Lockhart, the archmage idiot who dreamed to be king. The traitor had joined him because they too wanted the civil war to happen, but for an entirely different reason. The traitor firmly believed that the Griffin Kingdom was beyond saving. It was like a horrible painting drawn by an incompetent artist. More brushstrokes could only make it even messier. What the kingdom needed was to burn the old canvas and start again with a new one. Blinded by his own arrogance, Lockhart had never expected that his ally was slowly siphoning his funds and assets, turning Lookhart's accomplices into obedient slaves. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. When the civil war would start, the traitor would have all the necessary means to make his side prevail, wiping off the board both Lockhart and the corrupted royals. After the incident in Candria, they had been forced to change approach. With the parasites discovered and a cure already available, the original plan was ruined. When Balkier had revealed his new target, the traitor assumed the Heaves were giving them a sign. By moving their pawns, they had weakened all the academies, making them easy prey for the undead. The traitor assumed that once the 6 great academies were lost, the other great countries would invade the Griffin Kingdom. Nobles and commoners would have been united in grief, forced to ally against a common enemy. The outcome of the battle wasn't important. What mattered was to destroy the status quo. Yet the damned Linjos had ruined everything by allying himself with the Lord of the Forest, leading the other headmasters by example. The traitor had spent the last months building the strength they needed to plunge the kingdom into chaos. If revolution was impossible to achieve, the traitor was willing to settle with revenge. Chapter 302. White Griffin Academy. Over a month later, 1 week before the first exam of the 5th year. The life of Freya Solivar Ernez had always been an emotional roller coaster. A speeding trap that kept her dozens of meters above the ground, and which would never stop, no matter how much she screamed, cried, or barfed. Sometimes it would slow down, but only because another big fall was nearing. She had wasted her childhood attempting the impossible task of earning her mother's affection. After she turned 12, she had been thrown in a dog-eats-dog environment. Everyone in the academy wanted her to fail, hoping to get her place in the rankings. Everyone in the Solivar household wanted her dead. Her brothers and sisters were afraid of the status she would achieve by becoming the first mage in the history of the household. If Freya succeeded, being the firstborn or the line of succession would become meaningless. She would become Duchess Solivar's right-hand mage and inherit everything when Mommy Dearest took her leave. Freya had spent so much time watching her back that her encounter with Uriel had been like seeing the sun after a perennial winter. Thanks to his status and power, the environment turned peaceful, giving her the opportunity to relax. Meeting Quilla saved her soul. Despite having a much harsher life than Freya, Quilla still had a gentle heart and only strived for affection. She restored Freya's faith in mankind. After giving her the equivalent of a sugar candy, the 4th year turned out to be the apex of her misery. First, she had lost her family. Being branded like a traitor, she had been forced to accept Lady Ernez's offer to adopt her. Then, she had killed her first human in cold blood, and lastly came Balkier. Alas, the worst had yet to come. All those events had pushed her to the brink, yet they also helped Freya to open up with her new parents and sister. They had grown closer over time until she had stopped feeling a prisoner and became part of something bigger. Until she felt part of the Ernest family. Being loved unconditionally, having the freedom to decide about her future was something that in the past she could only dream about. Now that she had everything, Freya was scared to death. Scared to lose that safe haven and return to a cruel world that didn't give a damn about her. She had no idea what to do with her life. Being a healer is a quiet job, but quite boring. She would often mentally list all the pros and cons of her available choices. Also, I don't like people very much. Spending my life helping others sounds like a waste of time. The career of a mage knight is even worse. I would be killing people for a living. I'm sick and tired of fighting. I just want some peace. It's absurd to ask a 16-year-old girl to decide her future. Maybe I should take a sabbatical. Until I find my answer, I can always be the Erna's household's private magician. Besides, the 5th year is still long. I have all the time I need. Quilla Erna's was having the time of her life. She had a doting father, a creepy but caring mother, 2 wonderful sisters, and the house of her dreams. Despite all the bad things that had happened, the 4th year had been the happiest of her life. It had given her a place where she belonged, and more importantly, a family. She still had 3 more years before being considered an adult, but she had already planned her future. After graduating, Quilla had decided to work as an assistant at the White Griffin's Light Department until she was old enough to apply as a professor. She had already discussed it with her mentors. Even Manohar was enthusiastic at the idea and promised to endorse her application. The thought actually scared her. With the fickle genius reputation, his approval could do more harm than good. Being a healer and a teacher was her dream job. It would give her the opportunity to improve the world around her while leaving her the time to start and nurture her own family. After the winter break, with the start of her growth spurt, her confidence in her looks and talent skyrocketed. Quilla was looking around for a boyfriend, but with little luck so far. Orion apprentices were kind boys, but only saw her as a child. As for her colleagues, those she liked didn't return her interest, and vice versa. Like a very shy 14-year-old boy that had already asked her out a couple of times. Quilla would have preferred someone more assertive. She was fed up enough with her own shyness to put up with that of others. Yet his last move was bold enough to convince Quilla to give him a chance. Zodert had gifted her a small ring. I was nothing fancy, just a trinket a student of humble origins could afford. It was a note, it was wrapped in that mattered. A charmed ring for a charming girl. A cheesy pickup line, but it's still cute. I'll wear the ring for our first date. She thought, if things don't work out, I can always give it back. The 5th year subjects were demanding, but unlike during the 4th one, no professor assigned homework. That left Uriel plenty of time to practice his skills as a warden in the lab built inside his living quarter and to help Lith with his research. It's amazing how the so-called impossible arrays all require at least hexacasting and fine control over all the different mana flows. Yet Lith manages to perform them at the first attempt thanks to his mastery of first magic. Maybe I was wrong always dismissing it as inferior magic. Their research progressed slowly. Unlike everything Uriel had learned so far, each array seemed to have a complex function. Casting them wasn't enough to obtain results. To respond to an external trigger, the energies that formed the arrays had to be properly manipulated while holding the balance of the overall structure. Over time, Uriel became fascinated with them and learned how to cast them by himself, to experiment even when Lith was otherwise occupied. Thanks to that exercises, Uriel's mastery of Tier 4 and 5 arrays improved by leaps and bounds. Sometimes, when he was focused on the mystical patterns, he could feel a burning sensation located near his solar plexus. At first, he thought it was a coincidence. After the phenomenon happened several times, he tried all of his diagnostic spells. When none of them detected any anomalies, Uriel even asked for Manohar's second opinion. Even according to the god of healing, there was nothing wrong with him. This to our household. The royal constable journey, Erna's was nervously drumming her fingers on the armrest of her chair. It was unusual for her being nervous, let alone impatient. Like every predator, she knew the importance of biding her time, of choosing the time and place of the attack to not leave the prey the slightest chance of survival. Yet all that waiting was wearing down her nerves. Chapter 303. The vision changed almost a month ago. Why are we doing nothing? Journey's anger was barely contained. It took all of her willpower to prevent it to show on the outside. Because based on all we know, it's likely we are about to face the threat of slave collars, like those the Pontus household purchased from the missing alchemist Hatorn. Duchess Distar was disgusted by her own words. Just like Journey, she hated feeling helpless. Whoever the traitors are, they have managed to slip out of our net too many times. Linjos needs time to remove enough members of his staff to require an official turnover without arising suspicions. If we act rashly, we risk alerting them. They would only need to activate the collars to force us to butcher innocents while they escape under the cover of the ensuing chaos. We are lulling them into a false sense of confidence, so that our first strike will also be the last. Her hands were clenched so hard they were white. The blood drained from her fingers. Easy for you to say. It's my little girls that live in that death trap, not yours. Why can't we at least warn them? To achieve what? Spook them? Spook the traitors? We may be wrong about the collars. So far, all the security sweeps came out negative. Miriam Distar shook her head. It's not only your daughters who are in danger, but every single student in all the remaining 4 academies. If you can't keep your personal and professional life separated, maybe you should recuse yourself from the case. Journey Distar knew that Miriam was right and hated her for that. How long before we move? She asked. Very soon. Village of Lusha. Lith considered the idea of becoming an elder brother and an uncle almost at the same time disturbing at best. When during the 2nd month of winter Alina noticed she had skipped her period, Lith knew he had succeeded. Both his mother and sister were nervous. The former considered her pregnancy like a miracle, while the latter was on edge, being her first time. Lith was basically on call 24/7, but luckily nothing happened in his absence that Nana or Tista couldn't handle. Lith would go back to his village at least once a week during the weekend to perform a complete checkup on both women. Everything is fine. Again, Lith snorted. I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't mean to rush you. Alina apologized with such a merry voice it sounded fake, but she was actually sincere. She was just too happy with the good news. Do you want to know the gender of the babies? Lith asked. Do you know it already? Judging by their enthusiasm, he had just asked a rhetorical question. Male. Female. He pointed at Alina first and at Rena second. Ugh, my family's so far had bad luck with males. Orpal, Tryon, and then me. Let's hope the little one grows into a better man than us. It doesn't take much, after all. Lith thought. How dare you? Sola scolded him. Not even reminding her of his body count spared him from a lecture. Both families didn't share Lith's negative outlook on life. They celebrated together until late. The next day, after the end of the lessons, Lith went to Floria's room to share the latest news and give her an early birthday present. In a few days, she would turn 16, becoming an adult according to Mogur's standards. Congratulations, you must be thrilled. Floria embraced him tightly. For a moment, Lith lost himself in the delicate fragrance of her hair. Not really. He didn't want to spoil the mood for his family, but at least with Solus and Floria, he could be honest. I'm scared at the idea of having another brother. I almost have only bad memories about them. Most of all, he was scared of loving and losing his little brother. Lith was certain he couldn't take it again. As for my niece, I don't know. I'm afraid the baby will take a lot of her time, and we will grow even further apart. How many times do I have to tell you? Floria sighed. You can't keep your loved ones under a rock. You must learn to let them go. You're not losing a sister, but gaining a niece. Lith didn't reply. It was a matter on which they had to agree to disagree. I have also come to give you your birthday present. Lith took out from his pocket a small box, handing it to her. Why so early? Don't you know it's bad luck? She giggled, rushing to opening the box. It contained a lily-shaped gold pendant. Rena's father-in-law had melted and purified the gold, while Lith had shaped it with magic. It was so lifelike that Floria attempted to smell it. I researched the etymology of your name. This flower symbolizes the goddess you are named after. It's also enchanted to be durable and as a dimensional amulet with a capacity of 50 square meters. It was the highest grade dimensional item Lith could create without making a fuss. Thanks. It's a wonderful gift. She attempted to kiss him, but Lith stopped her. That's just my cover story gift. Otherwise, people would think I'm even more of a cheapskate than I already am. What's the real gift, then? Floria was puzzled. I know I can't forge master anything your father couldn't do better. Not I can afford something you couldn't buy on your own. The only thing I can offer you is my trust. Please, close your eyes and give me your hands. Floria did as instructed, while Lith activated invigoration on her. What the heck? What he saw left him flabbergasted. Compared to the last time he had visited her, Most of the impurities in her body were converging towards the mana core. They hadn't moved much, but the movement was as clear as the day. It's just as I feared. Solus sighed. The prolonged exposure to you, combined with the repeated use of invigoration and the practice of high-level magic, seems to stimulate other people's cores. Exposure to me? Invigoration? Lith was still stunned. Do you remember Balkir's attack? To save her in Uriel, you had to use invigoration a lot. Also, since she asked you out, the two of you spent a lot of time together. Protector told us that the key to awakening is a high mana density, compared to a normal mage whose core is dormant. Yours is a small mana geyser. Doesn't this mean that Tista is likely to awaken? Compared to them, she has been much closer to me. If she enters the White Griffin, I think it's a reasonable assumption. Solus replied. It also depends on her talent and luck. Tista hasn't awakened in years, and Floria's impurities have barely moved. Don't overthink it. Lith took a deep breath to calm himself before proceeding. He used invigoration to remove the most external impurities from her hair and skin, destroying them as soon as they emerged. What's this smell? Floria had no idea why she was feeling so hot and fuzzy, but the stench was out of this world. This is my gift. I'd like for it to remain a secret between the two of us, he said, bringing her in front of the mirror. I don't feel any different. Floria looked her reflection without noticing anything. Take a bath and let me know in the morning. Doctor's order. Lith kissed her deeply, tasting her fragrance before leaving her room. He took off, flying along the corridor towards his living quarters. I'm proud of you, taking such a leap of F. Watch out, Solus yelled. Lith reacted swift as the wind, dodging a barrage of icicles, only to feel an invisible grip blocking his limbs. He immediately activated fusion magic to neutralize the effects of the spirit magic holding him. The person using it was an expert. They slammed him against the walls and the ceiling before he could react. I bet you didn't expect to meet another awakened one, did you? A too familiar voice said, while the world around him faded to black. Chapter 304. The attack had been ruthless, quick, and carefully planned. The barrage of attacks had thrown Lith out of balance, while the spirit magic throw exploited the momentum of his own dodge to slam him against the nearest wall. The impact sucked the air out of Lith's lungs, making him lose focus at the same time. Solus had been helpless against the ambush. The attacks had come out from the occupants of the rooms they always passed by on their way back. She had no reason to be vigilant of them. Solus would rather focus on those hiding behind corners or pillars, but the coast was clear. Or so she believed until the attack came. Lith was about to lose consciousness, but thanks to the prompt use of fusion magic and the skinwalker armor, he managed to heal himself at the last moment. Lith stood his ground, assessing his predicament. Mana sense and life vision both told him the situation was desperate. He was surrounded by all sides with no way out. The students weren't a problem, but the person in front of him was. Professor Valisa Nailier had already weaved several spells while he was still trying to get up. Dodging was dumb of you. A cruel smile distorted her usually kind features. Buying that armor was dumb of you. Thanks for making everything easier for me. Her voice was carefree, like they were playing a game. Several fireballs appeared around him, exploding at the same time. I really like this spell of yours. I hope you don't mind I copied it. Lith took out the gatekeeper sword from his pocket dimension, imbuing it with enough water magic to instantly conjure an ice coffin around himself while using air magic to protect his ears from the explosions. What the heck is she saying? I'm making her job easier? At least she's dumb enough to use one of my spells. I know exactly how to counter it, he thought. Alas, Nailier wasn't stupid. As soon as the coffin formed, she unleashed a river of lightning that used Lith's own barrier to bypass the armor's protection. Another dumb move. Should I think you still have a crush on me? Her laughter was cruel, oozing mockery. Lith inwardly cursed at himself. He could only endure the spells by using earth fusion. He was taking damage after damage. Up to that point, he was stuck on the receiving end of the battle. Damn, she has silenced the whole area. No matter how much noise she does, no one will hear a thing. Solus thought, racking her brain for a solution. I think I know why she said you're making her job easier. She can't kill you because of the Academy's arrays. If she attempts to, they will protect you and send a distress signal. Lith had almost forgotten about the Academy's protection. He never needed them. Wind blades shattered the ice coffin. He was tempted to offer them no resistance to activate the protective arrays, but he felt something was wrong. Nalier was taunting him. She was likely to have taken precautions. Lith parried them with the blade, discovering he was right. They were too weak to inflict him a serious injury. She was aiming to make him faint. You know, I can't believe it took me so long to realize we were cut out of the same mold. Two awakened ones. Lith ignored her words. Distraction tactics were one of his specialties, too. How you survived the Talons, help find a cure for the parasites, or saving the life of that Dyrus idiot. Everyone believes you are the next Manohar, but I knew it couldn't be the case. You are too normal, too sane to be a genius. Lith moved his hand behind his back, taking the ballot out of the pocket dimension, only for it to be ripped away from his fingers by Nalier's spirit magic. That was rude. Time to finish this. He ignored her words again, pretending just for a second to be willing to fight for the ballot in a spirit magic tug of war before jumping towards the nearest student. The arrays work for everyone. It means if I strike one of them down, it will activate anyway. Lith thought. The student was startled. Lith moved too fast for her eyes. Yet before his sword could reach the girl, he felt an agonizing pain from his back. Several knives stabbed him. Their enchantment was strong enough to piece his armor, while their blades were too short to do serious damage. Nalier pulled out the blades with her spirit magic, activating their second spell. Healing magic from the knives closed all of Lith's wound, completely restoring his body. At the same time, the healing weakened him even more, sapping his strength. I call them the anti-Academy weapons. Strong enough to knock you out, but not enough to trigger the arrays. You have no idea how much trial and error I had my little lambs go through before Wainmeyer perfected them. So many of them got reprimanded or expelled for hurting their own friends. She chuckled. Sacrifices must be made sometimes. Right, little lambs? The students' faces were like stone, yet their eyes were crying in fear. She struck Lith's temple with an enchanted leather club, making him lose consciousness. He fell for my trap, just like I expected. The students weren't here to trap him, they only served as bait. Now that he's out of the picture, I'm not going to let him ruin my plan. An awakened one is an unpredictable wild card. I have no intention to discover if a slave collar works on us or not. If not for these damned arrays, I would kill him right now. Nalier sighed. She brought Lith in her apartments, bringing along a few students. During the winter break, she had everything prepared in advance. It was impossible to have a secret compartment made without the power core of the Academy detecting it. Yet she could easily turn one of her closets into an excellent prison. Short chains were hanging from the wall, blocking Lith's neck, waist, legs, and arms. Then, Nalier proceeded removing all of his enchanted items. The dimensional amulet, the magic storing rings, and rings that store spells, and lastly his skinwalker armor, leaving Lith naked while his possessions were stored inside her dimensional amulet. It makes you wonder how pretty would I become if I awakened earlier. She sighed, looking at his broad shoulders and chiseled body. Nalier attempted to remove Solus's ring with spirit magic, but to no avail. Want to play hard to get? Fine by me. Cutting a finger or two makes no difference. A jagged blade appeared in her hand, making Solus desperate. She had been fuming with rage from the beginning of the fight, hoping Nalier would come close enough for a sneak attack. Yet the professor had Lith always moved by the students or with spirit magic. She never came close enough. Wishing she could use Lith's mana when he was unconscious or at least move his body, Solus's only real option was to perform an all-out attack. As soon as the blade cut the skin, Solus shape-shifted from ring to a stone scorpion, attacking Nalier physically and magically at the same time. Chapter 305. Nalier had been on guard the whole time. Life vision had allowed her to notice how the ring was full of energies since day one. She used her blade to pin Solus to the wall and the students as human shields against her spells. They were badly hurt, but thanks to their uniforms, there wasn't much Tier 2 spells could do. Solas's yellow core limited her greatly. What a marvelous object! Nailier blocked Solas with spirit magic. It's not only capable to store the user's mana, but also to move on its own. It will be an excellent addition to my collection. Solas could only curse her bad luck. If only Lithas and her energies weren't as one, she could have hurt him enough to activate the array and save him. When Nailier tried to store Solas inside her dimensional amulet, she was in for another surprise. The amulet didn't respond, and Solas kept floating in midair. It's impossible. Is this thing really alive? Good thing I'm always prepared. She took out a mystical wooden box out of her dimensional amulet. It was engraved with silver runes of power. A blue mana crystal the size of a tennis ball was embedded on its lid. When Nailier opened it, it generated strings of blue energy that trapped Solas, dragging her inside the box before it closed on itself. She attempted to shape-shift multiple times, but the strings relentlessly followed her, adapting to her every change. The blue gemstone powered up the runes, sealing its content from the outside world. The bond between Lith and Solas was broken. The backlash gave Solas a seizure, while Lith suddenly woke up, roaring like a wounded beast. The killing intent he released made 2 of the students faint. The spirit magic blast he generated made everyone but Nailier fly against a wall and lose consciousness. She sneered at his swan song, hitting him on the head with the leather club again and again. The club was another enchanted item she had prepared. It was made so that it would inflict a lot of pain, but no harm, draining the victim of their vitality. What she didn't expect was for Litha's mouth to suddenly open like a maw, filled with fangs instead of teeth. The moment her hand was close enough, he bit her deeply. The fangs dug in her flesh until they reached the bones while 7 eyes stared at her with hatred. Nailier ignored the pain, passing the club to the free hand, resuming the beating. The eyes burned bright in defiance, refusing to let go. The maw was almost closed when the head fell limp again. Even fury had its limits. What the FCK are you? Nailier cursed while using invigoration to close her wounds and restore her strength. It took her less than a minute to heal the injured students and replenish their life forces with invigoration. They'd spent no mana, so they were still in their peak condition. Here are your orders, my little lambs. These chains are strong enough to hold an angry BYK, but what's even more important is their color. She pointed at the mystical aura surrounding the shackles and the chains both. When it's red, it means Lith is unconscious. When it turns green, it means he is awake. As soon as it happens, you have to stab him with these knives. She handed them the anti-academy knives. Don't stop until it turns red again. Wait for my signal. Only then you can kill him. Cut his head and pierce his heart, just to be safe. The 5 students nodded in unison. After you are done with him, return to your rooms and wait further instructions. Tomorrow is the big day. The next morning, Floria hummed all the time while she was walking to pick Lith up for their morning stroll before breakfast. She wore the golden lily pendant over her uniform. It didn't matter to her that wearing an early present was bad luck. Floria was too happy to care about silly superstitions. I don't know what Lith did, but my skin had never been so smooth, nor my hair so silky and easy to comb. My sisters are going to be so jealous. She inwardly giggled. What made her so happy wasn't the beauty treatment itself. The changes were so slight, it was unlikely for anyone to notice them, and she knew it. The reason behind her happiness was Floria felt something had changed between them after the date in Vanilla. Lith was a riddle, wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma, but he was finally starting to unravel himself. When she knocked at his door and no response came from inside, it didn't spoil her good mood. After 10 minutes of knocking, she started to worry. Maybe he's just too tired. It's no big deal. We'll see each other for breakfast. Floria didn't believe her own thoughts. Lith had never stood her up before. Well, he missed breakfast too. She was close to panic. The others tried to reassure her everything was fine and called Lithas on his communication amulet. Yet he never answered. Fear started to spread like fire through dry grass. The second gong, signaling the start of the code of practice without him attending, was the final straw. Where do you think you are going, Lady Ernest? Professor Farg yelled at Floria, who was walking away. Enter the warp gate now, or I'll make sure you lose more than a lesson's worth in points. Feel free to report me to Linjos. Floria retorted. It will save me the time to explain to him what's happening. Maybe if 2 students disappear at once, he'll move his lazy ass. Farg attempted to localize Lith with the artifact Lady Tyrus had given her, but to no avail. It's impossible, she thought. For his hybrid aura to disappear like this, he should be dead. No one could die inside an academy. I have to warn Lady Tyrus immediately. Floria had no guardian to summon by her side, but she had the next best thing. Journey Ernest walked through the warp gate, leading to Linjos' office less than 5 minutes later, wearing her royal constable badge on her chest, right above the heart. What's the meaning of this? Linjos jumped from his chair. The gate had opened without his consent. Royal override code. Journey replied with a stone-cold voice. I'm Constable Ernest, investigating on a missing student case. Hope you remember my husband. Linjos turned pale, seeing Orion standing right behind her. The memory of him beating the headmaster an inch from death was still vivid. What are you talking about? What case? Do you realize what you coming here could cause? You may have ruined a month of hard work. Not at all. I have here a missing person report and the authorization to investigate. She slammed on his desk Floria's statement and Alina's request for intervention. The 2 women had always kept in contact, and after hearing about her son's disappearance, Alina would have even signed a deal with the devil to have him back. I have all the necessary paperwork. Find me Lith, and I'll walk away before the gate even closes. Linjos had no choice but to comply. He attempted to activate the tracker in Lith's uniform, and when it didn't work, he checked all the records about who had got in and out since his last sighting. This makes no sense. The tracker can't find him, and no one has left the academy unsupervised yet. Well, the good news is that he is still alive and somewhere inside the academy. The even better news is that I finally have a reason to turn this place upside down. Tell Distar that I'm done waiting. Now we're going to play by my rules. Chapter 306. Attack him where he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected. That was how Nalier had defeated Lith, but also the way Journey Ernest planned to smoke out the traitor. The arrival of Constable Ernest was a big enough monkey wrench in Nalier's plot to put both her master and contingency plan at risk. It was impossible to use dimensional magic inside the academy because of the array blocking it. The only way out was using the warp gate, but even with the help of her little lambs, it was impossible for her to drag away Lith unnoticed. Her teacher ring was useless too. It not only would leave a record of her position, but also could move her inside the 5th floor only. Each floor of the castle is huge, but with enough time, they can search every nook and cranny of it. I can't hide Lith forever, nor can I kill him and store his body in a dimensional item. I can't believe months of careful planning are about to be crushed because of a stupid girl. Nalier had underestimated the depth of the bond between Lith and Floria, dismissing it as a simple crush. She was also unaware of Marchioness Distar's plan of putting the academy in lockdown to search for the traitor. The information blackout had worked like a charm. The problem was the Marchioness had no way to know what the enemy intentions were. It almost resulted in a perfect setup to douse the fire, yet to have it ready after the house was completely burned down. Almost. Lady Ernest was a decisive woman. The moment Floria contacted her, she put her first contingency plan in motion, pulling a lot of strings and calling in as many favors. She knew Lith well enough to know that he wouldn't leave the academy without letting her little flower, or at least his mother, know. His disappearance could only mean something big was about to happen. Taking out someone of his caliber in such a clear manner, inside an academy at that, meant the enemy was as strong as well-prepared. Lady Ernest was certain she had not a second to spare. Alas, she was right. Professor Amela Fard contacted Tyrus as soon as Floria left, reporting to her everything she knew. "What are your orders, my liege?" Farg asked. "I'll be there in a while." Tyrus sighed. From her throne, she could feel the air in the kingdom turning heavier by the second. "I mean to spectate, not to intervene." I feel that what's happening at the White Griffin is similar to Balkir's attacks. A reckoning. Humans are bound to make mistakes, and it's only by suffering the consequences of their choices that they have the opportunity to grow. I don't plan of doing like Salark and treat them like a bunch of kids that need to be held by hand. As for you, Amala, do whatever you think is right. You have my permission to use the full scope of your abilities. After closing the call with Farg, Tyrus called her only two friends. The fall of one of the great countries might be something all Guardians would like to bear witness. Inside the enchanted box, Solus had long recovered her senses. Without her bond with Lith, she couldn't feed, nor she could grow stronger. Only weaker. That didn't mean she was powerless, though. She had still all the abilities of a yellow cord awakened one. Invigoration didn't allow her to recover her strength, but was a crucial instrument for her survival nonetheless. She had spent months studying the boxes together with Lith, attended the same lessons, and followed all of his steps toward becoming a forge master. Invigoration made it possible for her to study the lock, keeping her sealed. Solus wasted no time crying or despairing. She had spent the last few hours planning her escape. Always prepare whatever my AS looks like, you witch. Solus had never been so angry in her whole life. It could be said that even though she had developed the whole spectrum of human emotions, she was incapable of hate. At least until that moment. Hatred was something usually Lith generated enough to supply a small army, something she was used to contain, being careful not being infected with. Now it burned through the very core of her being like molten lava. She would have loved for life to be like those comics Lith liked so much as a kid, where trivial things like love, friendship, or rage could produce miracles, giving the hero endless strength. If love could do any good, Nailier wouldn't ever manage to take them apart. If rage was worth something, Solus would have already turned the box into cinders to be reunited with her other half. Feelings have no power per se. They're only what drives you toward your goals. I have to do like Lith always does. Not let myself be controlled by them, but harness them to keep my mind focused. She thought. Luckily for me, this box has been built to be difficult to open from the outside, not from the inside. I also doubt Nailier ever suspected that the dimensional amulet she stole from us is actually empty. I still have access to a dimensional pocket full with everything a compulsive hoarder with full-blown paranoia prepared just in case. Wait for me, Lith. I'm coming for you. Tendrils of darkness magic emanated from her body, relentlessly eroding the internal safeguards of the box. Solus only had to make sure to survive the conflagration. To her, it didn't matter who or what was outside the box. The whole Mogre could burn for all she cared. City of Valeron, capital of the Griffin Kingdom. Inside the king's quarters. Are you sure giving Constable Ernest the royal override code was the right thing to do? Queen Silpha asked. Absolutely. King Moreau nodded. He was engrossed in testing his gatekeeper longsword potential. The more I read the reports about this Lith, the more I'm inclined to believe he is a natural awakened one. Traitors come and go. We fight them on a daily basis. Awakened ones are too precious to be lost. If I'm right, he will be the first one we know about inside the whole kingdom. We could even pitch him against the Magic Empress, if we play our cards right. The Magic Empress was the only known natural awakened on the Garland continent. How could he be an awakened one if some kids are strong enough to take him down? Silpha found the idea simply absurd. Maybe he is non-awakened. Or maybe the traitors have developed a weapon capable of defeating one. Morone replied, whatever it is, we can't afford to stay idle. We are already left with only 4 of the 6 great academies. Losing the White Griffin and the most promising student in one fell swoop may be a blow that we could not be able to bear. Not now. We are already stripping the ancient noble households of their privileges bit by bit, redistributing them according to merits and loyalty. The kingdom is still too unstable. If the traitor threatens one of our assets, we must react swiftly. Chapter 307. If there really is a weapon capable of defeating an awakened, we must get to it first. That's why I've given her the royal override and control over a division of the royal army. We cannot afford any more failures. Queen Silpha pondered on those words, before agreeing with her husband. The royals needed all the power they could muster to survive the impending crisis. "Mom, Dad, thank the gods you are here." Floria quickly embraced them both. Their presence was enough to mitigate her fears. "I'm glad to see you too, my little flower." Journey returned her embrace, feeling something was different about Floria. "There isn't a moment to lose. Mom, this is the list of all those Lith had marked as suspicious." She handed Journey a list of names followed by their addresses in the academy. Floria hadn't been idle either, collecting all the intel she could while waiting. "This one is the closest one to my room." She pointed a name in the middle. "Dad, whatever happened, it must have taken place between my room and his. I can guide you there." "There is no need," Orion replied. "My amulet already contains all the blueprints of the 5th floor and the list of its residents. I'll go check on my own. You go with your mother. You're the only one that knows these kids. Maybe you can notice if anything is out of the ordinary. And maybe keep your mother in check." He inwardly added. Orion took off, quickly reaching Litha's room and moving from there towards Floria's after taking out his equipment. Open spaces were a nightmare to investigate. Too many things could go wrong. Animals, bad weather, worst-case scenario the culprit could burn everything. A closed space, an academy at that, was another matter entirely. Orion didn't take much to find the place of the ambush. What a smart son of a dragon. Orion smirked while finding a cut alongside the stones on the floor. Before falling, Lith had employed his failed slash against the girl to leave a mark behind. Darkness magic could delete many things, but couldn't hasten the Academy's self-repair mechanism. Starting from there, Orion found traces of water marking the use of ice magic and small burnt marks in the crevices between the rocks. That, coupled with the lingering traces of ozone, indicated a powerful lightning had been employed. Whoever attempted to clean the scene is an amateur. Either they know nothing about our investigation methods, or they didn't expect an investigation at all. Orion's guesses were actually both right. Nailier had cleaned the crime scene to the best of her abilities, but not being a forge master, she had a limited idea of what they could achieve, aside from what Wainmeyer knew. Professor Wainmeyer was many things, but not a member of the Knights Guard. Hung on the wall, Lith had already undergone several cycles of regaining consciousness just to be knocked out by the anti-Academy weapons again. Nailier's little lambs weren't allowed much freedom of thought or movement. They were trapped in a nightmare of their own creation. When they accepted to follow Archmage Lookert's plan to trigger the Civil War, only a few raised objections about the use of slave collars. Even then, it was only because slave collars were one of the most universally despised versions of forbidden magic. Simply owning one carried the death penalty, if not for the whole families to be stripped of their titles and wealth before being executed. Most of the little lambs considered slave collars the most natural course of action. Each one of them would receive a master ring, allowing them absolute control over their victims. Just considering all the possible uses an obedient slave could have made their mouths watery. Little did they know that even their master rings had been replaced with normal slave items. Nailier made sure no little idiot could endanger her plan out of lust or cruelty. She hated nobles the most, so she had always intended to use them as cannon fodder in case something went wrong. Once the little lambs discovered the truth about their rings, it was already too late. They had been trapped in their own bodies for months, drowning themselves in self-pity, which made them more than happy to vent out their frustration on Lith. Between their rage and the boredom of the task, they didn't notice that every time it took them a little longer to make him faint again. Unlike Nailier, who had awakened at 15 years of age with an already cyan core, Lith was awakened from birth, starting with a measly red core. It meant that his body had all the time to adapt to the changes, expelling impurities little by little. So far, Nailier's core had progressed only once because of the long time it took for her body to adjust from a dormant cyan core to an active one. It also meant that she had expelled impurities only a few times. She was magically superior to Lith, thanks to her blue core, but her body was weaker. When she planned how to keep him prisoner, Nailier used herself as a standard. According to her calculations, The pain would keep him from casting spells before losing consciousness. Lith's pain tolerance, however, was higher than hers, especially since the bond with Solus had been broken. The emotional pain he was experiencing, together with the endless void her absence left behind, allowed him to clench his teeth and emit small bursts of darkness magic inside his body. With every cycle, Lith was able to shut down more and more pain receptors. At first, he would last barely a few seconds, too weak to project magic on the outside. Soon, the pain wouldn't break his focus anymore. As soon as Constable Erna's arrived, Nailier knew she had to move ahead of schedule, even if it meant endangering her master plan. Her lambs on the outside had warned her about an incoming division of royal guards. They would reach the White Griffin any minute. Too many external witnesses would ruin everything. All of her planning was based on each floor of the academy being strictly isolated from the others and the outside world alike. The only silver lining in all that situation was that the code of practice had been suspended. All the students were still present, making her plot still feasible. She walked right behind Wainmeyer, who knocked out Balthus, Linjos's secretary, on their way in. "Headmaster, we heard the news. Is there anything we can do to help?" Wainmeyer's voice was genuinely worried, yet her hands kept trembling, one of her eyes twitching. "I wish." Linjo sighed, not missing any of the odd details of that meeting. The two professors had never been close. Quite the contrary, he was pretty sure that being Wainmeyer from an ancient noble family didn't make her pleasant company for a self-made woman like Nailier. "Please, return to your apartments. You'll be contacted when your turn to be interrogated comes. I can't believe this is happening. Never before a student has disappeared like this inside an academy." Those words triggered Nailier's rage. Yeah, if it happened outside, it would have made things a lot easier for you. Her voice was full of contempt. "Nailier, I know what happened to you, and it was terrible. Now, things are different." A shower of lightning and ice rained down on the headmaster while he was still talking. All he needed was to activate his headmaster ring to trigger the defensive arrays and make the attacks vanish into thin air. How did you silently cast such a powerful spell? Another wave of Linjos's hand, and both professors were trapped inside a circle of light. He hadn't missed how Wainmeyer just stood there while he was being attacked. Whatever was going on, he wasn't willing to take any chances. Chapter 308. "So it's true." Nailier laughed maniacally, giving Linjos the creeps. "A headmaster is like a god inside their own academy. Sorry to break it for you, dear Linjos." Nailier took out from her pocket a magic crystal so finely chiseled it resembled a diamond. Each facet had a rune of power engraved on it. "That's a power core unit. Where did you take it from?" Linjos was horrified by the implications the gem had. There are no gods in this world. She ignored him, breaking the gem and causing the power core to temporarily shut down, bringing all the arrays offline at the same time. Ever since the sabotage of the Dimensional Magic Training Hall, Linjos knew that something was wrong with the power core of the Academy. That was why even when there was a desperate demand of ballots, he couldn't allow having more produced. Usually, the Academy's Forge Masters would be granted access to the power core for several reasons. To create items linked to the power core, like the staff rings or the ballots, for the maintenance of the array departing from it, or of the power core itself. After the sabotage, Linjos had blocked the access to the Academy's heart, adding such duty to everything he already did as headmaster. The effort drained his mind and body, causing his premature aging. Yet he did it anyway, for the students and for the future of the kingdom he believed in. "As soon as the crisis is resolved, I'll have the time to rest," Linjos repeated to himself over the months. All that pain, all those sacrifices, were for naught. Nailier had already made Wainmeyer tamper with the power core enough to create a power core unit. Despite its insane complexity, it was a pale imitation of the headmaster ring, but with only one function. Nailier unleashed a new wave of spells against the headmaster. She had to be quick and kill him before the power core activated again. Cursing his bad luck, Linjos could only blink away to safety. The whole situation was a nightmare. He couldn't understand how Nailier managed to silently cast one spell after the other, without giving him any time to fight back. Nailier, too, was cursing her bad luck. Her original plan was to lure Linjos away from his office and backstab him. Nailier would have framed Wainmeyer for the murder thanks to the ballot she carried with herself. With the headmaster dead, her little lambs would have the opportunity to butcher all the students of commoner origins or those from new magical bloodlines. It would make it appear as even after Balkier, there was still a radical faction among the ancient noble households not willing to back down. Her hope was that the massacre would reopen the divide between social classes and trigger the Civil War. After all, Wainmeyer and the Lambs all came from influential families. The surviving students would be found in possession of slave items they brought themselves inside the academy. All the evidence would lead to Archmage Lockhart and his allies. There was nothing left indicating Nailier's involvement, especially after she would have made sure Wainmeyer and the few little lambs that worked with her died in the ensuing fight to save the academy. A head-on fight was something she wanted to avoid. The headmaster robe was a masterpiece. It not only offered great protection from physical and magical damage, but also constantly boosted Linjos like potions would, making him immune to spirit magic. Not to mention Linjos was one of the best young mages of the kingdom. The headmaster didn't mindlessly blink. The spell was too expensive to use it recklessly. He used it to keep his distance and reach hidden stashes in his office. Whatever she is doing, it's a game two can play. Linjos unleashed a barrage of ice, fire, and lightning generated by alchemical tools. Just like true magic, they had no cast time. Nailier cursed. She was forced on the defense after barely 3 exchanges. Each one of them was at the peak of Tier 3 spells in terms of power, and there were so many that not even Awakened One wearing a professor robe could tank them without risking their life. Thanks to the defensive spell she had ready at hand, Nailier avoided the brunt of the damage, but Wainmeyer wasn't so lucky. Even with the protection from her magical items, she was slammed against the wall and on the verge of unconsciousness. To make things even worse, the smoke the spells generated engulfed the whole room, making them all blind. Or so Linjos thought. Nailier activated Life Vision, making the figure of the headmaster appear as clear as the day. She could see him casting an unknown spell. Just like Lith, you are making my life easy with your stupid moves. Nailier's voice was stone cold. Her hands emitted a pillar of fire. It was her personal spell, Tier 5 Searing Gale. It was a mix of air and fire magic, generating a small-sized tornado of a temperature capable of melting stone. Its tip rotated at high speed, making it capable of drilling through every defense she had ever met in battle. Even if the victim somehow survived, the lightning bolts hidden inside the vortex would fry or at least temporarily incapacitate the victim. The spell struck Linjos' chest with surgical precision, yet the headmaster didn't flinch. Searing Gale was being sucked in by a warp steps in front of him and unleashed on Wainmeyer's right arm, turning it into cinder. The shock from the pain of the amputation almost killed her. Only her professor robe and the items she had forge mastered for herself saved her life. Linjos didn't mean to slay Wainmeyer, only to incapacitate her. Alas, he had no idea what spell Nailier would cast next. The only thing he could do was to make sure that Wainmeyer wouldn't be struck anywhere vital. He chose the right arm because a mage without their hands or voice was usually helpless. Nailier cursed again, dispersing the smoke with air magic since it clearly was of no advantage to her. The room cleared, revealing Linjos wearing some kind of odd-looking glasses while holding what seemed to be a steel tube. "Hello there, young miss." Linjos' words were followed by a series of sonic blasts coming from the tube. Nailier found herself kneeling while holding her ears. The sonic booms were making her bleed from the eyes, nostrils, and ears. They also shattered her eardrums and balance alike. Damn Forge Masters! Damn them and their creations. Nailier knew how dangerous a Forge Master with a dimensional amulet was. It was the reason she brought Wainmeyer along. They were walking armories, and Wainmeyer was supposed to be as good as the headmaster. Linjo's was even younger than her, yet he had left his fellow Forge Master no time to act. Linjo's fired his weapon over and over again, until he was sure Nailier was in no condition to fight back. He took out from his dimensional amulet a rope that bound Wainmeyer by itself, and another for Nailier. You have much to explain. I'm sure Lady Ernest will be able to learn from you everything we need to save the country. Alas, Linjo's didn't know that the only thing that Nailier needed to recover was to breathe. He had stopped his attack thinking that even if she had the means to heal such extensive wounds, exhaustion would have been the death of her. Yet thanks to invigoration, with every breath her body healed. With every breath, her strength returned. Chapter 309. Linjo's took out his communication amulet to call for reinforcements when Nailier's sword, moved by spirit magic, impaled him from the back. The headmaster fell on his knees, coughing blood. The surprise almost made him ignore the pain. "How? What?" were his final words. Nailier freed herself and Wainmeyer from the ropes, moving the unconscious professor like a puppet thanks to spirit magic. Wainmeyer's remaining arm easily lifted the sword, decapitating Linjo's with a single swing. Blood spurted like a fountain, painting the room red. "It is done." Nailier laughed maniacally. "Linjo's died by your hand. By your sword. Alika, if only you could see. I'd kill you right now, but you need to make a statement to not leave any doubts about what happened here." Nailier took out her communication amulet. "Rise, my little lambs. The time has come. Your final order is the following. Do whatever your heart wants. Erpe, kill, stel. Have no fear for tomorrow because you don't have one. Show the whole world what kind of monsters you really are." And so, the final part of her plan began. Outside the White Griffin Academy, Lady Tyrus wept warm tears for Linjo's death. Nice order. If it wasn't for her being raving mad and using slave items, I could almost admire her cleverness. Salark said with a disgusted expression on her face. "Watch and learn, girl. This is why I lead my country with an iron fist and why Ligane abandoned the Gorgon Empire," she said to Milea Janice, the Magic Empress, and also the only human among the spectators. Humans are cruel beings that inflict pain on their kin, not out of necessity, but simply because they can. They can't feel good with themselves unless they stand atop others. Indeed, Ligane nodded. Violence only begets more violence. Abuses breed monsters in an endless cycle of blood and chaos. White Griffin Academy, right after Orion left and before Nailier entered Linjo's office. Journey compared Floria's list with the one on her amulet. "Good thinking, my little flower. I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Mom. I think we should start with this girl because not only she's close to the scene, but she also belongs to a very powerful family. It means that if she is involved, she has a lot to lose. You can use it as leverage," Floria pointed out. "By the gods, she is really getting crafty." Journey didn't miss her daughter becoming mature, nor the lily pendant at her neck. Let's just hope her bull-headed father doesn't make a fuss when he notices it too. She inwardly sighed. The two women quickly reached the room of Leflia Corun, daughter of Duchess Corun, an influential figure among the ancient noble households. While Floria made way, Journey studied Leflia's family file without finding anything unusual. According to her personal file, Leflia was a tall 16-year-old girl with black hair and chestnut eyes. In a way, she reminded Journey of her own daughter. She had flunked her battle mage class, hence she could only graduate as an unspecialized mage. It made it impossible for her to achieve a high ranking. The moment the door opened, Leflia's lineaments contracted for a split second. Behind the girl's meek appearance, Journey recognized hatred and envy. "Is there something wrong, Ernest?" Her voice was low and sweet. "Royal Constable Journey, Ernest. We need to talk about what happened last night." Journey stood in front of Floria, tapping her index on her badge. "I'm sorry, I know nothing about it." Leflia opened the door, inviting them to come in. Journey didn't miss her eye twitching for a second. "The rooms are soundproof, inside and out." She was still denying when Nailier's voice came out of her communication amulet, giving the final order. The change was like a switch had been pressed. Leflia's features turned into a mask of wrath. She took out a short sword from her dimensional amulet, attacking Floria in a frenzy. Floria didn't even flinch. She grabbed and twisted the opponent's wrist with the left hand, making her drop the blade. At the same time, she grabbed Leflia's neck with the right one, raising her from the ground with a single arm. "You better start talking, or I'll start squeezing." Floria's voice was stone cold. She was barely letting Leflia breathe. "I'll never talk. You WHRE. You don't deserve what you've got. You sucked up to 2 filthy commoners to improve your grades." Another twitch happened. "Keep her hanging, darling. Do not let her go, no matter the reason." Journey took her badge and passed it over Leflia's neck before moving to her hands. "We are lucky." The badge had just emitted a ping, while Journey waved it over the left hand. "It's only a slave ring." "What?" Floria was shocked. She had only read about them in history books. "Why lucky?" Journey didn't reply. She stabbed the girl's arm with one of her needles, which acted as a nerve blocker. It immediately became limp. "Because otherwise I couldn't do this." She cut off the ring finger with a single movement. Only then the slave item could be removed. Why do you think they used collars in the past? After the amputation, Leflia changed again, sobbing desperately. "It's Nailier. She made me do it." Lith is kept prisoner inside her apartments. Floria was shocked by the turn of events, yet she retained the presence of spirit to stop the bleeding and reattach the finger with light magic. The cut was so clean the extremities took little effort to heal. The moment Journey stepped away, Leflia turned hysterical again. "Don't leave me. She'll be back. They'll kill you. They'll kill us. Don't leave me." She threw herself at Journey's legs, hugging them desperately. Lady Ernest took the needle out of her arm and into her neck. Leflia's pupil suddenly dilated while her body relaxed. "Who was going to kill us?" she asked, placing the girl on her bed. "Everyone." Nailier's apartments, in the same moment. Litha's eyes opened, staring at the tireless efforts of his captors to make him unconscious again. They could stab all they wanted. He felt no pain. With his focus finally restored, all he needed to do was breathe. With every breath, his body healed. With every breath, his strength returned. As soon as he had enough strength, he grabbed one of his captors with spirit magic, pinning her against the wall. One by one, they all found themselves hung on the walls or the ceiling just like him. When Lith returned to his full strength, he started studying the locks. His mind was cold and rational, while his heart was scorching hot with rage. Yet the void inside him devoured everything. The hunger consumed all other feelings. Black tendrils came out of his body, eroding the pseudo-cores on his wrists, legs, and waist until they exploded. Between his body being fully empowered by earth fusion and the use of invigoration, he didn't care for the damage sustained. The first lock almost cut off his left foot. The second one only gave him a 3rd burn degree and some metal shards stuck in his flesh. With each lock, he learned more, taking less damage opening the next one. His fury didn't make him stupid. He kept the neck for last. The left wrist was barely scratched. The right one remained unscathed. Lith grabbed the shackles at his throat, turning them into dust before speaking. His voice was coarse and guttural. His words growled more than spoken. "Where is my ring?" Chapter 3:10. My stone ring. Where is it? Speaking was a mammoth task for Lith. He had to focus and spit the words one by one, while suppressing the urge to tear those present apart, limb from limb. The fury running through his veins only steeled his willpower to find solace first and butcher Nailier later. First things first. The students were shivering in fear, but because of the set of orders they had received, they were unable to speak. At least until Nailier's final order came out of their communication amulets. "Do whatever your heart wants. Set me free, you F-King monster, or my mother will have you and your family beg for death." Some said, "I beg of you, have mercy. Nailier made me do it." The others sobbed. 2 girls out of 5 students were cold-blooded enough to release the spells stored inside their magic rings, uncaring for what would happen to their comrades. The shroud of darkness enveloping Lith engulfed their magic attacks, eating away most of their destructive power before they struck. Yet because of the short range, they were more than enough to make him bleed, to rip his flesh apart, and expose his muscles. Lith reacted, sending the darkness towards his attackers. The tendrils pierced the two students, robbing them of their vitality, while transferring it to Lith and healing his wounds. The girls withered like dried-up mummies in a matter of seconds, before turning to ashes together with their uniforms. Feeding off someone's life force not only allowed Lith to recover without becoming more fatigued, but also restored his body's stamina, as if he had a short rest. I have already used invigoration too much. I need more energy. I still hunger. Lith thought. The remaining three became hysterical, screaming and crying for help. Lith had the darkness engulf them without inflicting any harm. The coldness it emitted amplified their fear, but at the same time made them snap out of panic. I'll ask it only once more. Where's my ring? I don't know. I swear, sobbed a red-haired boy. Then you are useless. The boy only managed to emit a short yelp before disappearing in the shadows. Lith's complexion was getting better with every meal. Soon, it was clear they had no knowledge about Nalir's plan or Solus's whereabouts. Leave no loose ends, Lith thought before killing them. He took a blanket to cover himself before looking for food. Invigoration can give me back my strength and mana. Vampiric touch can restore my fatigue, but none of them can replenish my nutrients. I need all the advantages I can get before confronting Nalir again. Judging by her order, Linjos is dead and the academy is about to fall. I won't let that witch get away with this, nor the vision to come true. Solus, Floria, wait for me. I'm coming for you. After eating everything edible he managed to find inside Nalir's apartment, Lith stepped into the chaos the White Griffin Academy had become. Solus's patience had run out from hours, yet she endured. She could feel her strength dripping away, but so was the spell keeping her prisoner. Unlike Lith, she couldn't heal or recover her mana indefinitely, so she had to take a surgical approach. First, she had to probe the mana crystal and the pseudo-core's pathways, looking for weak spots. Only then Solus could open countless small holes, making the energies that empowered the box dwindle. Each hole was too small to make the structure unstable enough to explode, but together they drained the magical prison at a faster rate than Solus's energy consumption. The moment Solus broke the lock, the mystical box exploded outwards in a shower of flaming splinters. She found herself in the room of one of Nalir's little lambs. She had decided it was best to keep Lith and the artifact as far as possible from each other. Giving the box to a lamb was her insurance that even if something went wrong, it would be impossible for Lith to find it. Her jailer was a chestnut-haired 15-year-old boy that was currently busy taking off the pants from an unconscious girl that was lying on his bed. She was also bleeding profusely from a head injury. The moment the boy saw Solus, Nalir's highest priority order took effect. He took out his communication amulet to alert his master when Solus drove one of Lith's elemental blades through his throat with spirit magic. The fire-enchanted dagger made short work of the uniform's defenses, killing the boy in one blow. Solus was shocked. She knew Nalir's lambs were mind-controlled and likely not to be entirely responsible for their actions. She had expected the arrays to activate, saving Lith, the girl on the bed, and the lamb in one fell swoop. The only possible explanation is that Linjos is dead. Solus inwardly cried. She really liked the headmaster. Having no time or mana to spare, she quickly poured a healing potion down the girl's throat before leaving the room. Solus discovered that closing the door was useless. The locks were offline, like everything else in the academy. Sorry, kid. I have no time to babysit you. She turned into her spider form and activated her mana sense. She could fly, but had no idea where to go. Walking on the ceiling would allow her to avoid being spotted while looking around for Lith. She wanted to find him as soon as possible. Fascinating, isn't he? Tyrus said, pointing at Lith, who was walking double time through the corridor, slaughtering all those who attempted to attack him. Indeed, Ligain used life vision, watching Lith's second form bulge from his aura, clawing to escape. He really is like a magical beast. I'd say his natural elements are fire and darkness. Unlike humans who were equally attuned with all elements, after evolving from their animal form, magical beasts would be limited to two, at least until their further evolution into evolved monsters. Even the Guardians were no different. Solark elements had always been light and darkness. They made her a literal embodiment of the cycle of death and rebirth, even before she became a phoenix. Ligane was a creature of fire and air, while Tyrus's foundations were air and light magic. Isn't that the living artifact you told me about? The dragon pointed his finger at Solus, who had just escaped the room. You know what it is? Tyrus raised an eyebrow in disbelief. Sure I do. It's Manadian's desperation. Her story is long, but interesting. Then, save it for another moment. Salar cut him short. I'll call your father and free ya. You alert Quilla of the danger. If Nalir's pawns get to her first, she is as good as dead. After hearing from Leflia what the traitorous professor had made her do, Journey had a grasp on her intentions. After her sister, Floria warned Uriel too. She hadn't forgotten about Litha's vision. As far as she knew, any of them could die at any moment. How did you know she was controlled? Floria asked after arranging a meeting point with the rest of her family. The twitch in her eye. Not even a strong-willed person can resist a slave item, but they can signal their distress through small movements of the hands or the eyes. I know it from experience. Chapter 311. Did someone enslave you in the past? Floria felt her heart tighten at the idea. No, but every constable has to train against such devices to let their colleagues know about their predicament at their first meeting. Enough talking, listen to my words, and do it carefully. Journey grabbed Floria's shoulders, looking her in the eyes. Once we are out there, attack to kill. At this point, it's too late to save any of them. Aren't they victims? Just like her. Floria was having a hard time adapting at the circumstances. No, they were ready to enslave people. They are as bad as Nalir is. Journey shook her head. Also, if you show any mercy, they will not return you the favor. You heard her command. They'll kill us even if it costs them their lives. You have no idea what wearing one of those things feels like. You became a stranger in your own body, forced to do whatever the owner of the master ring wants. Most victims of a slave item commit suicide within a year from their rescue. It's like being Erped in the mind and the body, every single moment. Floria unsheathed her estoc, taking a deep breath while thinking about her family and Lith. She hoped they would give her the strength to do what had to be done. The mayhem taking place in the corridors soon turned the academy into a war zone. No one could be trusted. Fear and paranoia made even the non-mind-controlled students attack anyone on sight. There were more spells flying in the air than rice at a wedding ceremony. Solus didn't stop to watch at all the acts of violence. Yet every one of the crimes she witnessed reinforced her hatred. Stopping Nalir wasn't enough. Solus wanted to kill her. Solus was getting more desperate by the second. She hadn't much mana left and still couldn't find any trace of Lith. Soon, she would be forced to trade her own memories to obtain the power she needed to keep moving. How can I sacrifice even one of them? She inwardly cried. What if I choose the wrong one and become another person? What if I forget the reason why I'm even moving? By my maker, where the heck is he? She could still bond to another person, but it would mean losing him forever and giving someone access to all their secrets and most private moments. Solus would rather die than betray their bond. When it happened, she couldn't believe her own 14 senses. Solus could finally pick up an aura that she would recognize among thousands. Lith was just a few hundred meters in front of her. She let go of the ceiling while casting their personal flight spell, soaring through the air like a small meteor. Solus felt so happy, so relieved to forget about everything else. Her other half was so close she could almost feel his touch again. Alas, that cost her everything. Where do you think you are going, little one? Nalir's cruel voice shattered Solus's hopes. Her spirit magic stopped Solus in mid-air, pulling her toward the professor's open palm. Who would have thought I would find you while looking for that damn constable? Heaven sure are on my side today. Even if she had been at her peak condition, Solus wouldn't have the strength to escape her pull. She offered no resistance, letting herself be reeled in like an exhausted fish. FCK the heavens, and FCK you 100 times over. Solus thought. The moment before Nalier's pure mana could solidify enough to block her movements, Solus revealed her trump card. She opened her pocket dimension, using spirit magic to unleash on the bewildered professor every single weapon that Lith had forge-mastered an alchemical tool, she had realized. They were all medium-low quality items. Each one would have negligible effects on someone of Nalier's caliber. Their sheer numbers, however, were a force to be reckoned with. Where the FCK all this stuff comes from. Nalier's hate for the magical crafting arts knew no bounds that day. Exploiting her enemy's distraction, Solus assumed the form of a snake, biting Nalier with all her strength. She still had the sample of Balkier's venom in its purest form. Solus pumped it all in the professor's bloodstream, just to be safe. The numbing sensation quickly spread through her hand, triggering Nalier into a panic. She had almost died once from the venom to keep her covered during Balkier's attack. Nalier knew she had no time to lose. If the poison reached her core, she would die. Also, she was no healer. Nalier didn't have any mean to extract the venom aside from invigoration, but it was hard to focus on a respiration technique while deadly blades and energy blasts were raining on her. Solus turned tail, searching for Litha's energy signature again. Luckily, he hadn't gotten far. She still had enough energy to reach him. Solus flew as fast as she could, even resorting to employ her distress signal, the one that had brought them to meet so many years prior. Anyone in the academy could hear it, but Solus didn't care. She wanted to get his attention before it was too late. Yet it was 1/4 late. Nalier warped in front of her, clutching her tight with an iron glove surrounded by a mystical aura. Damn Forge Masters. Can't live with them. Can't live without them. Nalier spat in disgust. She had managed to move so fast only by employing the barrier built in Wainmar's masterpiece, while using invigoration to expel the venom. It was one of her strongest artifacts, along with the glove she was currently wearing. Thanks for making it easier to find you, stupid piece of rock. Nalier sneered. Indeed, said a voice from another warp steps, shutting her mouth with a fist that sent Nalier tumbling on the ground for several meters despite the barrier shielding her. Solus escaped her grip just for a split second before finding her into another one. The contact triggered the bonding, making them whole again. For Solus, it was like being able to breathe again after almost drowning. For Lith, it was like seeing the sun at the end of an endless winter. They became one, their minds fused in joy and hatred, allowing their cores to beat as one. Solus covered his hand, but this time it wasn't a glove. The gauntlet covered Litha's arm up until the elbow. Its fingers ended in razor-sharp claws, and small blades came out from its ulna. The gemstone resting on its center wasn't yellow anymore, but of a deep shade of green. A split second later, the gatekeeper sword was back in Litha's hand, and the skinwalker armor replaced the shroud. Lith didn't waste time asking himself how it was possible, nor losing himself in Solus's warm embrace. Not like she would allow him anyway. They were one, which meant they shared their every thought, including the burning desire to kill Nalier. Chapter 312. Nalier's own words echoed in her head, but now they sounded more sarcastic than triumphant. Like heck, the heavens are on my side. What's happening here? The entire world seemed to have turned upside down in less than a minute. Litha's corpse was supposed to be hung to a wall, yet he was jumping with the bastard's sword aimed at her neck. He was also wearing the skinwalker armor that until a moment ago, she was certain it was safe inside her dimensional amulet. Nalier had no way to know Lith and Solus shared a pocket dimension, and thus the dimensional amulet he always carried around was merely a decoy. After Lith had lost consciousness, Solus had stored away the gatekeeper, making it appear as it was Litha's final act before fainting. When Nalier had taken away the rest of his equipment, Solus had bid her time, letting her store away the magical rings while Mana Sense allowed her to study the timing with which Nalier opened her dimensional space. The moment Solus saw with Mana Sense the glow preceding the opening of the dimensional rift, she had recovered the skinwalker armor just a split second before it could be stolen. Nalier never bothered checking her loot, because until Lith was alive, the magical items would bear his imprint, making it impossible for anyone else to use them. The professor was shocked by the sudden turn of events, yet she managed to activate the barrier in time, blocking Lith's first attack without a scratch. She still felt the impact, realizing that his strength was above hers. This doesn't make any sense. I awakened almost 9 years ago, while he can't be awakened for more than 6 years. It can't be just because he is a man. It doesn't matter. He is still just a student while I practice magic for almost 20 years. While he spent the whole night getting stabbed, I had a good sleep. Whatever that stupid piece of stone, does I still hold all the advantages? Nailier's reasoning wasn't wrong, but it wasn't entirely right either. Having graduated from the academy 7 years prior, she indeed had a stronger core and more experience with using high-level true magic. However, Lith had a stronger body, all the knowledge from his previous life, and a rich combat experience. Not to mention that fighting Linjos and patching up Wainmeyer had already cost her quite some energy, while Lith partially recovered from feeding on her little lamb's life force. Nailier infused herself with air, fire, and earth magic, intercepting Lith's sword with her own. The impact made her slid a few meters backward, almost making her lose the grip on the weapon. "What the FCK are you?" Nailier extended her left hand, pointing the iron glove against him. A series of shock waves struck Lith, like several cars were ramming against him one after the other. Solus used her spirit magic to create a force field, while Lith used his own air magic to disrupt the attack, making it lose part of its strength. Yet the remaining force was enough to make him crash against a wall, bleeding from his mouth and nostrils. FCK. It's the first time I fight and awakened with this much experience. Magical beasts were always limited to 2 elements, while the Clacker Queen was as inexperienced as Protector. In a battle between awakened ones, experience and equipment can easily turn the tables. I have yet to create a single damn tier 5 spell. He thought, "Do you think we should retreat?" Solus didn't like the idea one bit. She wanted Nailier to suffer an agonizing death, but the short exchange had shown her a gap between the two that Fury alone couldn't overcome. They needed a plan, a diversion, or both. "No way," Lith replied. "The vision showed me someone capable of killing the Queen's core before slaughtering my family. I bet we are staring at her." A couple of Nailier's little lambs joined the fray, showering Lith with a torrent of fire and lightning respectively. He kicked the wall behind him, managing to dodge both the attacks by jumping above them. He impaled the students with the darkness-imbued gatekeeper, sucking away their life forces to restore his own. Nailier used the split second of distraction to blink behind his back and decapitate Lith with a horizontal slash. Or so she planned. This time Lith was ready. Just like her, he was silently weaving spell after spell from the moment they had met. Her blade struck Solus's spirit magic force field, which made it lose momentum, allowing Lith to briefly touch her weapon. His hand released a small but powerful globular lightning that traveled through the metal, bypassing all of her protections. Thanks to Earth Fusion, Nailier managed to avoid the brunt of the damage. Yet the moment the spell struck, it stopped her movements long enough to put her on the back foot again. Uriel had yet to recover from the shocking news Floria told him about when all hell broke loose. The door of his room opened, letting 2 students in. With the Academy's power core down, the locks had stopped working. Uriel knew the invaders pretty well. One was Liam Lookert's cousin, a brawny 15-year-old boy. The other was a very cute girl he dated the previous year. "You'll pay for what you did to the Luckhart family, Dyrus," the boy said, unleashing a fireball from one of his rings. "How could you play with my feelings and toss me away like garbage? You said you loved me." The girl conjured a swarm of small ice blades. They were all aimed to Uriel's nether regions. Luckily, Uriel had taken Lith's vision very seriously. He had stockpiled his dimensional amulet with the best tools money could afford. Arrays were too slow to cast, and healing magic dealt no damage. Since his specializations were useless in case of ambush, he could only be prepared for the worst. The moment he realized the danger he was in, Uriel blinked twice. The first moved him behind his assailants, leaving a fire seed at their feet, while the second brought him outside the room, just in time to close the door behind himself. The 3 fireballs exploded almost at the same time, making the walls tremble. I know you probably were out of your minds, but I really want to live. I'm sorry, I'm not a fighter good enough to have the luxury of mercy. He inwardly prayed for their souls. Uriel could hear terrible screams, some of pain, other desperately calling for help. He felt terrible ignoring them, but he did it nonetheless. After finding an isolated corner, Uriel opened a warp steps to the arranged meeting point. He didn't immediately cross it. Uriel simply used it to peek if someone else was already there. It was only when he spotted Freya and Quilla that Uriel moved to the other side, happy to see again his loyal friends. Freya was deadly pale. The rapier in her hand was dripping with fresh blood, and her clothes were torn in multiple points. Quilla was doing her best to hold back the tears, clenching her knife with so much strength her hand was white. Chapter 3:13. As soon as they saw Uriel, they immediately pointed their blades at him. What the heck is wrong with you? Uriel managed to stop at the last second before getting stabbed. Seeing surprise instead of lust in his eyes, Freya sighed in relief. Didn't you hear that crazy BTCH command? I almost got her ped thrice in the last 5 minutes. If it wasn't for Quilla, I would be already dead, or worse. Both the girls had warped to the destination as soon as Journey contacted them, trying to keep themselves out of sight and out of troubles. What they didn't expect was for every single mind-controlled boy to recklessly converge on Freya on sight. Her biggest mistake had been using a spell to kill the first assailant. The noise had revealed her position, multiplying the number of enemies. They had kept warping and fighting until that moment, managing to survive only because they wanted her body intact and because they completely ignored Quilla. She had never been so happy for not being very attractive. Floria, Journey, and Orion warped there too a few seconds later. Aside from Journey, they were all deadly pale and covered in blood. Glad to see you are all right, girls. Journey checked her daughters and husband, almost ignoring Uriel. It's the only piece of good news so far. The power core is down, and so are the warp gates leading here. It will take a while for the reinforcements to get here. I'm afraid when they arrive it will be already too late. I contacted Manohar on the way here. He says they have their hands full treating wounded students and neutralizing the professors under Nailier's influence. Trust no one. Anyone here could be an enemy. They all nodded in unison. We have only 2 options: run to the forest and get ourselves to safety, or find Nailier and kill her. If she dies, all those under the influence of a slave ring will be freed. No, there's a 3rd option. Orion chimed in. The kids save themselves by hiding in the forest while we stop that madwoman. Don't go, please. Quilla sobbed desperately. I don't want to lose my family again. Please don't leave me. Journey hugged Quilla, trying to calm her down. We'll never leave you alone, darling. Our duty is... Journey stopped, her eyes wide in surprise. Quilla's blade had pierced her lung and heart, striking from the blind spot created in the stomach area when Journey embraced her. There was a reason if Quilla had ignored Nailier's final command. Her duty was getting rid of Constable Ernaz all along. After Lith, Nailier considered Journey the biggest threat to her plan. She had come too close to the truth too many times. Nailier knew that the only way to kill someone so meticulous was to exploit her only weak spot, Journey's love for her family. While everyone was still too shocked to react, Quilla blinked behind Uriel's back, cutting his throat from ear to ear. Blood spurted everywhere, blinding Floria and Freya while Orion attempted to save his wife. Quilla blinked again, this time going for Freya's life. Nailier had given her precise orders. To make sure Journey was beyond saving, Quilla had to kill all the healers. Lith pressed the advantage by activating his Tier 4 True Magic Spell-Burning Prison. 6 fireballs appeared at the same time around Nailier, one above, one below, and the others in a square shape. The fireballs exploded simultaneously, one reinforcing the effect of the other. It was the same tactic Nailier had employed in her ambush, and now it was Lith's turn to exploit the spell's nature to predict her next move. If she used ice to counter the fire, he would use lightning. If she blinked, he would follow suit, stabbing her the moment Nalier reappeared. Thanks to life vision, an awakened one could see the exit point of a blink, making the first one to employ such spell an easy target. Yet she did neither. Nalier activated once again her sword's barrier, using it to take the brunt of the damage. It was one of Lith's best spells, yet she came out of it almost unscathed. Almost. Lith bolted forward, boosted by air fusion, but Nalier was ready for him. With an upward swing of her sword, while she was still in a crouch position, she managed to deflect the gatekeeper and aim for his right arm at the same time. There was no time to adjust his stance. Lith could only let go of the blade to prevent his limb from being cut off. Nalier smiled in triumph, aiming to Lith's head next. That until she saw the gatekeeper plunging from the air as quick as a bullet toward her heart. Only then she noticed Lith's right hand was bare. The gauntlet was gone. Cursing at herself for falling into such stupid trap, Nalier blocked the falling blade, leaving her side exposed in the process. Lith punched her in the ribs with all his strength, cracking 3 of them. His aim was to break the ribs and use them to puncture her lung, but Nalier managed to fly backward at the last second, reducing the damage. Damn, at least she took a solid hit. Sooner or later, she will have to use invigoration, and that will be my only chance to take her out. Lith thought. Alas, Nalier was well aware of such a possibility as well. Solus returned to Lith's hand, who was flying towards the enemy at full speed to not give her a single moment of rest. Thorman, the professor of the Mage Knight's specialization, flew against Lith enveloped in a sphere composed by conjured shields which rotated at high speed. It was the Tier 5 Mage Knight spell, Revolving Fortress. Lith cursed when Solus pointed out the professor was wearing a slave item too. Now that they were activated, she only needed a glance to recognize them. Lith attempted to dodge, but the shields broke the formation, barring his way. At the same time, Professor Binlow of the Mage Knight class unleashed against him several armor-shaped constructs. Each one was armed to the teeth, but frail. Lith needed only a few slashes to wipe out shields and construct alike, but gave Nalier the time to get back at her peak condition. Binlow sent a pulse of mana, allowing the construct from his Tier 5 personal army spell to repair all the damage they had sustained. Sorry, Lith, said Nalier with a smug expression. You're not the only one who has brought friends to the party. Chapter 314. Going toe-to-toe with an awakened one who possessed a stronger mana core and was more experienced with magic had already pushed Lith to his limits just to keep up. Even with his core and Solus's resonating, he was barely at the cyan upper stages, while Nalier had a blue core. Now that he had to face her along 2 other professors, Lith felt his heart sink. He had long learned not to underestimate fake mages. The only advantage he had against stronger mages was usually the surprise effect, but Nalier countered that. There was nothing he could do that she couldn't, making his odds of victory non-existent. Damn, if I put my life on the line, I can kill one of the professors, maybe both. Not Nalier thought. She can always use them as meat shields to buy time and recover. Lith thought. Should we run away? Solus hated not being strong enough to help him. Reality was a harsh mistress. All her battle spirit meant nothing in the face of true power. It was better to survive to fight another day. Exposing our back? No thanks. A tactical retreat may help though. Divide and conquer. If I manage to fight them one by one, we can still do it. It's a big if. Solus was worried. The 3 professors were all casting something big. Meanwhile, Journey and Uriel were quickly bleeding out. Orion was using all his medical skills in an attempt to save them. He forced Journey to drink top-class healing potions while he used magic on Uriel's neck. Neither seemed to work well. Her organs are too damaged. She needs Tier 4 magic. His wife was dying in his arms, but Orion managed to keep his emotions in check, assessing the situation. Uriel, too, is in a bad shape. The wound is too wide and is sapping his life force very fast. We need a healer fast. Floria felt the ground crumbling under her feet. Her whole life was going down the gutter, and there was nothing she could do about it. Why didn't I learn healing magic too? Is my mom going to die because I didn't push myself hard enough? she thought. The truth was she never showed particular talent toward healing magic. The academy was a demanding environment, so Floria had applied to the Mage Knight specialization only to not waste her energies. Even if she did try the healer specialization, she would have flunked after the first trimester. It was just her helplessness talking, filling her mind with ifs and buts about what she could have done in the past to have control over an uncontrollable present. Instead of despairing, Floria activated full guard before Uriel's body could even hit the ground, quickly moving near Freya. Nailier's plan was the basic of the basic. Always get rid of the healer first. Since Lith had told her about his vision, she had practiced full guard relentlessly, even creating a better version of it. The moment Floria touched Freya, the blue aura expanding from her body enveloped her sister too, allowing Floria to share her multi-sensory awareness of the space in a 2 meters radius around them. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Quilla didn't strike immediately, retreating to a safe distance instead. She wants to prevent us from receiving help. Floria understood what was happening. Freya, go save Mom. Now, Freya was still frozen in place. She had no idea what to do. She could only save one of them. The situation forced her to take an impossible choice. Floria's order nudged the balance in Journey's favor. Dad, give Freya some space and call Manohar. We need all the help we can get. I'll keep Uriel alive. Orion nodded, understanding his daughter's plan. It was unlikely for Manohar, or anyone else for that matter, to have the time and the strength to help them. Moving them while in critical condition was also out of the question. It was only a trap to trigger Nailier's orders. Quilla is a healer too. If we snap her out of the slave item control, we can save them both. My little flower has grown into a capable leader, he thought. Quilla blinked, appearing at Freya's back only to find Floria waiting for her. She struck Quilla's throat with her extended fingers, preventing her from spell casting without doing her any real harm. Only then she grabbed Quilla by the arm, twisting it into a submission hold and forcing her face down on the ground. Dad, search for a ring, a bracelet, anything. If it's on the neck, we're doomed. Quilla struggled like a mad beast, but Floria was taller, stronger, and ruthless. She pushed her full weight on a knee pressed against Quilla's back to keep her pinned on the floor. Orion took off Quilla's rings one by one until he found one that couldn't be moved. A quick spell later, he knew what he was dealing with. It's the same model that Poultice Guy purchased. Finally, some good news. Orion took out a tool looking like pincer clamps from his dimensional amulet, using it to grab Quilla's ring. He then channeled a Forge Master spell that temporarily neutralized the slave item, allowing his daughter to regain her free will. Amalafarg had done her best, saving as many students as she could and bringing them to safety. The chaos and violence were overwhelming. Despite her efforts, she felt like she was trying to stop the tide using a spoon. The mind-controlled students would either warp away from her or attack innocents, forcing her to defend them while they got away and found another victim. She was starting to fear everything was lost when the artifact Tyrus had entrusted to her picked Litha's signal again. Thank the gods he hasn't run away yet. If I can convince him to help me, maybe together we stand chance. Professor Fard chose to fly instead of warping. She had already consumed part of her mana trying to stop the disorders. The scene at her arrival made even too much sense. 3 professors against 1 student, keeping him on the defensive. Fard recognized the crazed look in her colleague's eyes. The thought of how deep the scheme was made her shiver. It didn't take her much time to understand Nailier was in control of the slave rings. Cursing at the kingdom's bad luck, she unleashed 3-tier, 4 true spells, 1 for each target. Sunray generated a white hot beam aimed at Nailier's back. Stormclaw conjured a small tornado, which released wind blades in all directions. Lastly, Thundersnap released a chain of lightning that engulfed the whole corridor. Fard would have replaced Thundersnap with an earth-based spell to maximize the destructive power of her combo, but inside the academy, there was no earth to manipulate. The stones composing the castle were resistant to magic, even with the power core offline. Watch out! Nailier warned her minions, who otherwise would have no regard for their personal safety. The three spells converged a few meters in front of them, causing a chain reaction. Stormclaw absorbed the massive heat from Sunray, exploding outwards in a massive fire pillar, releasing scorching shockwaves, while Thundersnap bounced off the walls, attacking the professors from all sides. Chapter 315. Thorman used his conjured tower shields to block the whole corridor, and Binlo hastily activated a spell from one of his rings to conjure an ice wall 1 meter, 3.3 feet, thick to stop the blast. Lith could have used the diversion to escape, but charged forward instead. He imbued the gatekeeper with water magic to conjure a cold aura and himself with earth magic. The combined effects were supposed to protect him from the brunt of the damage. The fire pillar crushed the shields and melted the ice, yet it still had enough power to turn Binlo's constructs into gas. Nalier gritted her teeth, activating once again the magic shield of her sword while her minions conjured more protections. Lith struck them from behind with the gatekeeper, overloading Nalier's sword core and interrupting the professor's spells. The barrier shattered and the explosion engulfed the four of them, but Lith made sure to stand right behind Nalier. With the barrier down, she could either protect herself from the blast or from him, but not from both. She would also become his human shield, making it a trade worth Lith's while. Lith released all the spells he had ready, only to see them crushed by Nalier's glove. Its magic could be used as a sword, but also as a shield. Then, the blast struck them, and the four mages were slammed against the walls. As soon as the smoke dissipated, the corridor was peaceful again. Farg was satisfied with the results of her sneak attack. Every enemy was down and accounted for. There's just one thing that didn't add up. Why didn't you run away? She asked Lith. Throwing yourself in the middle of my spell was incredibly dumb. You could have D. Despite Solas's force field and light fusion, Lith's ears were still ringing. Solas had no such problem allowing him to understand what was happening and cut Farg short. Don't let her recover. You idiot. She's the mastermind. Lith pointed at Nalier's body. Only then Farg reactivated life vision, noticing that Lith and Nalier both were getting stronger by the second, their wounds closing at a speed visible at the naked eye. Another awakened one? This is a nightmare. Farg unleashed all the spells she had left, but it was too little and too late. Nalier raised her iron glove, hitting Farg with a series of shockwaves which crushed her attacks and sent Farg sprawling on the floor, bleeding from the nose, ears, and mouth. Seems it's just the two of us again, dear Lith. Nalier smiled without stopping to use invigoration. Lith was still sitting on the floor. Clearly the blast had somehow dealt him more damage than she had expected. Lith took a deep breath. Talking was cheap while spells spoke loudly. Arise. He carefully avoided breaking his use of invigoration, while all the fallen one rose on their feet to serve their master. As soon as Quilla was freed from the slave ring, her mind collapsed under the weight of her actions. Ever since the previous weekend, her life had turned into a nightmare. The moment she wore the ring, she had been under Nalier's thumb. She had fought the ring's influence the whole time. Yet her struggle didn't prevent her from feeling Journey's blood and guts cover her hands, nor Uriel's flesh tear up like paper under the enchanted blade. Quilla stopped struggling. She broke into tears while desperately trying to apologize. Meanwhile, Freya was already deadly pale. Regenerating Journey's heart and lungs also required her to share part of her life force to prevent her mother from dying of weakness. How the FCK does Lith to make it always look so simple. She inwardly cursed. She was doing alone something that the Academy trained her to do with 2 teams of 3 persons each. Feel free to take my life force. Orion had already done all that he could to stabilize Uriel. Freya thankfully nodded, taking only what she needed to keep her and her mother alive. Floria only wanted to hug Quilla tightly, to calm her down and tell her that it wasn't her fault, that everything was going to be all right. Alas, there is no time for kindness in war. Floria slapped her instead, hoping to snap her out of it before it was too late. Quilla, you are my sister, and I know how this is hard on you. She held Quilla's face with both hands, forcing her sister to look her in the eyes. Now it's not the time for tears. You must decide how you want to remember this moment. If as the day when you saved your friend's life, or the one when you killed your first human. Quilla nodded her head, choking back the tears and the snot running down her face. She placed her hands on Uriel, activating her diagnostic spell to understand how deep the damage was. The spell gave her no reply. She cast it a second and a third time before finding the strength to put her hand on his heart. There was no pulse. Uriel was gone. Quilla stood there for a few seconds, incapable of answering to their expectant looks. She felt something die inside of her. She had betrayed her family, her friends. How could I be so stupid to wear an enchanted item without even knowing what it did? She thought in hindsight. None of the group had ever heard about slave items, otherwise Lith would have warned them. Even his paranoia could do nothing against what he was unaware of. Quilla joined Freya, giving her life force to both women to help them to recover. Floria and Orion understood what had happened, but there was no time for mourning their loss. They stood guard against the chaos surrounding them, blocking anyone that could threaten the ongoing treatment. For Orion, they were just kids. For Floria were familiar faces she had seen every day for the past 2 years. Yet they killed them nonetheless. Only death awaited those who ignored their warning and entered the range of their spells. Journey regained her sense, coughing out the blood that had invaded her lungs. What happened? Her mind immediately recalled the events. The wound was deep, yet I feel good. Too good. Lady Ernez swiftly struck Quilla's stomach, making her faint and preventing her suicide attempt. My poor child, what have they done to you? Journey hugged her daughter's small body and kissed her head. Quilla was reduced to a pale husk. Her skin was deadly cold. Journey stood up, letting her family embrace her. There was relief in their faces and warmth in their touch, but no joy in the reunion. Watching Uriel's corpse, Journey knew there had never been a chance to save them both. She could tell by looking at the guilt in Floria's eyes that it was her taking an impossible decision in the heat of the battle. I don't know if Floria or Quilla will be able to live with what happened today. I can't do anything to change the past. The only thing I can do is to make Floria's choice matter. Following her directives, Freya stored Uriel's corpse in her dimensional amulet. They wouldn't let anyone harm him anymore. Then, she had Floria open a warp steps to the forest to send the girls to safety. Chapter 3:16. Freya was too weak to fight, and Quilla was barely alive. They would be dead weight in the battle that was still ahead of them. As soon as they crossed over, Floria closed the warp steps. What do you think you were doing? Orion was shocked. I already lost too much today. Floria's eyes kept weeping, but her voice was steady. I'm not going to hide somewhere while you two risk your lives. Mom, Dad, I couldn't live with myself if anything happens to you. Now all knowing I could have made a difference. Uriel is dead because of me. No, dude. Journey caressed her shoulder, honoring her daughter's determination. Uriel is dead because of Nalier. You didn't make Quilla your slave. You didn't order her to hurt him, nor you prevented the arrival of the healers who could have saved him. Let's put an end to this madness. Malaya Janice, the magic empress of the Gorgon Empire, had seen many awful things during her life as both wandering magician and ruler of her country. Yet seeing so many youths turned into beasts and lose their lives was a sight even her found disturbing. Ligane, why did you bring me here? What's the point in watching this massacre and do nothing? The fight between the two awakened seemed out of a bard tale. Unlike the three guardians, Milea couldn't avert her eyes from the bloodshed taking place on all 5 floors of the White Griffin. Because I wanted you to see firsthand what was the Gorgon Empire when I left it. One thing is reading history books, another is living it. Ligane explained. If you want to prevent such things from happening again during your rule, you must be brave enough to take unpopular decisions. Avoid grave problems long enough, and everything will fester. Being a ruler, it's not a popularity contest. Salar snorted. Those idiots of the Griffin Kingdom achieved such a long peace that they were afraid of the conflict with the noble households. Without conflict, there's no progress. They should have thought of the consequences of letting powerful people become even more powerful would have in the long term, instead of prioritizing the status quo. It ended with the royal family almost losing its dominance. It would have caused a civil war that would have lasted years. Remember, powerful people already have all the means they need to protect themselves. If you let them, they'll drain your authority. A stable country requires balance and shared resources. Indeed, Tyrus nodded. My only hope is that, just like for Balkier, this bloodshed will bring some real changes. The royals have finally opened their eyes. Now it's time for the nobles to see the errors of their way or get condemned by history. Nalier was surrounded by undead students who stared at her with looks full of hunger and hatred. Their usually pristine white uniforms were tainted by blood and excrement, releasing a foul stench that would make hard for most people not to puke. To Nalier, it was just another day. It was the exact same thing she felt every time she watched one of those disgusting stuck-up noble kids walk along the corridors of the White Griffin like they owned the place. Nalier had suffered them ever since her first year of academy, back when she was just 12 years. Her parents were employed as household staff of a minor noble and had been enthusiastic of their daughter becoming a mage. Nalier, not so much. Ever since the academy started, everyone treated her as a servant, not as a peer. She hoped that with time, she would manage to make some friends. That if she tried hard enough, people would see past her lack of a family name and respect her for her hard work. Reality proved her wrong, turning her hope into despair. She endured the hazing and the violence, only focusing on her studies. Magic was a fascinating subject, capable of taking her mind off the daily dose of misery, at least until it was nighttime. In those hours, she would return to be just a little girl away from home. Nalier was completely alone, resorting even to eat in her room to avoid more accidents. Most of the time, she would cry herself to sleep. During the third year, her body bloomed, and so did her magical talents. Things started with lecherous looks from the boys and harsh words from the girls, but quickly escalated. Nalier was often groped while going to classes or before the lessons. Every attempt of self-defense would end with her losing points and things getting worse. The professors blamed her for being unable to fit in while the headmistress condemned her overreacting over practical jokes. It was then that despair turned into hatred, when the academy turned out to be an enemy as much as her molesters were. After a group of boys dragged her in an isolated room and almost torpedoed her, the headmistress finally gave her a guilty ballot. It wasn't something she could cover up. The wounds on Nalier's body spoke volume. After healing the girl, Professor Vaster was ready to testify in Nalier's favor. His report would have likely put an end to many careers. It was only by offering a nice sum of money for her parents that the headmistress managed to keep Nalier quiet. The academy was still long, and her family could use that gold to start business. Nalier felt safe with the ballot in hand, so she agreed. Her existence kept being isolated and miserable, but at least now everyone left her alone. Nalier's hopes had long died, replaced by mistrust. To never feel helpless again, she chose the battle and war mage specializations. Nalier quickly gained the recognition of her new professors, Rudd included. Her mastery of dimensional magic surpassed even his hostility towards commoners. Everything went fine until the end of the fourth year when the class went to the mining town to practice with mana crystals. Nalier had forgotten about the danger of how outside the academy the ballot was just a round stone. It happened in the mines. Those who envied her talent, her ranking, or simply lusted for her beauty ambushed her in a gallery. Their plan was to harpy and kill her, disposing of the body in the forest. Nalier fought back with everything she had. She managed to hurt some of her attackers, triggering their fury. They beat her an inch from death, until out of desperation, she used her last ring to strike at a mana crystal, triggering a cave-in. The attackers managed to get away and left her for dead. They had dragged her into an isolated tunnel before she managed to regain consciousness, deep enough to make sure no one would hear her screams. They felt reassured when the cave-in went unnoticed. They thought her death would be considered an accident. Nalier survived. She remained there for over a week. Water wasn't a problem thanks to magic, but there was almost nothing to eat. Dimensional magic was blocked by the Academy's array, so she had to survive by eating everything she could, even things that would make a goat throw up. Rage kept her barely alive until she was rescued. After a week, the professors responsible for her specialization courses got worried and investigated. Both the headmistress and the professor in charge of the mana crystal subject were fired, but the culprits got away with it for lack of proof. Nalier spent all the time when she was recovering practicing true magic. Deep in the caves, surrounded by the mana coming out of Mogar, where it was so dense to take crystal form, she had relentlessly attempted to use dimensional magic to escape until her rage and talent awakened her core. Chapter 317. Because of the arrays, she couldn't kill her enemies, but now Nalier could ruin their lives. Spirit magic allowed her to make them fail every single subject they attended together. A nudge here, a push there was all it took to make them stutter or disrupt their hand signs. Their performance during the final exams was so poor not even their parents could avoid their expulsion. Yet it wasn't enough to quench her thirst for vengeance. She wanted them dead alongside their families. During her imprisonment, something broke inside of her. As hope died, madness flourished. Nalier joined the association as soon as he could, racking merits by accomplishing the impossible over and over again despite her young age. The Crown attempted to recruit her, but she resented them for the academy system. Nobles and mages alike fawned her, but she only wanted them dead. Her behavior left her alone, with a lot of enemies and no one watching her back. When she tried to convert her merits into titles and lands to put the families of her attackers under her thumb, only faraway lands and backwater regions were offered to her. With no ally in the court nor in the association, no matter how much she achieved, her goals would always be outside of her grasp. She had tried to fight alone against the world, and the world crushed her. I'm the victim. Why am I the one getting punished? She thought while her madness and rage grew day by day. When Linjos offered her a position as a professor, she thought she could have a fresh start, but even under the naive, gentle headmaster things weren't much different from the past. When Lockhart offered her revenge in exchange for her help, Nalier accepted only to act as a double agent. She hated people like Lockhart the most. Bringing down him and his associates was an opportunity she couldn't miss. After seeing how deeply rooted was the rebellion, how mages like Haytorn were willing to sell their own kin for money, Nalier lost all hope and a plan formed in her mind. Haytorn's slave items were a terrible tool. She had managed to fuse forge mastering and alchemy to obtain some special pills that allowed to remove the cursed objects while keeping the victims under control. Thanks to his associates, Lockhart always knew when a security check was about to happen and had the slaves using the pills to pass the inspections. Nalier used the first batch of slave items she received on the students instead of her alleged targets, turning Lookhart's accomplices inside the academy and her puppets and gaining control of every box that reached the academy. After helping Lockhart escape, he gave her his master ring. Just a second before she killed him and all his family with the Tier 5 spell Raging Sun she had silently cast. At that point, she had complete control over all of his assets, inside and outside the academies. She finally had the means to achieve her revenge. After capturing Lith, the awakened one responsible of so many failures, and turning Quilla into an unwilling sleeper agent, Nalier's plan was bound to succeed. Or at least so she thought, until Farg's unexpected arrival put down her minions, giving Lith the time to rise a small army of undead. Thanks to life vision, Nalier could see they were filled to the brim with darkness magic. They were all lesser undead, nothing compared to Balkir's creations. Yet Nalier felt afraid. In a real battle, a moment of distraction was the difference between life and death. With a wave of Litha's hand, the undead charged at her in a mad rush. It makes sense. He probably wants to stall for time, preventing me to focus while he casts his spells. Lith is using against me the same strategy one employed to capture him. She inwardly smiled. He really is a good student. If only he didn't make friends with the enemy, he could have shared this moment with me. It's really a pity killing him, but he left me no choice. He should have never got close to the noble scum. Even if its barrier was still offline, Nalier's sword had several tricks up its sleeve. She needed but a thought to unleash part of the power the many mana crystals embedded on its sword. They generated an ice storm that was supposed to repel the wave and buy her enough time to complete her spells. There's nothing that bulkier did that I can't. Lith thought. With a snap of his fingers, all the undead close to her detonated, releasing a cloud of darkness magic that surrounded her. It negated the ice storm and sapped her strength. At the same time, the rest of the undead shoot focused beams of dark energy from their eyes, replicating the effects of Litha's plague arrow spell. Unlike the Valor's attack, they were still slow and incapable of infecting their victims. Nalier had no way to know it. She only saw bulkier minions' attacks unfolding one after the other in front of her eyes, triggering her recent trauma. She went all out, releasing a blue aura while dodging or parrying all the arrows thanks to air fusion, managing to complete her spell. Final Sunset was Nalier's version of a Tier 5 Battle Mage spell. It generated around her a globe made of darkness, imbued flames that reduced to ashes all the undead that approached her. Nalier could also consume part of the sphere, turning it into spikes made of black fire to attack her enemies from a distance. The two elements were fused together, allowing even the dark energies to move at a speed normally impossible. Final Sunset was a perfect offense and defense that would stay up until all its mana was exhausted, but being a true spell, Nalier could channel more energy into it at will. As long as she could use Invigoration, she was practically invincible. She used her hands to better direct the flames, purging the corridor from the undead and the remaining corpses. Nalier wasn't going to underestimate Lith anymore. She now saw all the bodies lying around as potential traps. Lith had a vague understanding of what was happening, yet he didn't panic. He kept his distance while making all the remaining undead detonate. They would do her no direct harm, but they still forced her to consume mana to protect herself. It's a nice trick, but it's far from perfect. To keep using Invigoration, she can't move, making it impossible for her to hit me if I don't get close. Also, Invigoration can't be used for long. The more she uses it, the sooner she'll collapse. Lith had just finished analyzing the enemy's plan's weak spots when Life Vision showed him the exit point of a blink quickly forming in front of him. The dimensional fissure had yet to completely open, but the heat coming out of it almost burned his lungs. FCK. I didn't consider Blink. She can still move without moving. Until that spell is active, I can't even get close to her. Lith blinked away, just a moment before the floor he had been standing on melted. The fight had just turned into a deadly game of tag. Chapter 3:18. Valisa Nalier had gained the upper hand, yet she couldn't stop cursing her eternal bad luck. Lith had yet to die. She had no idea if her plot against Constable Ernest succeeded, and it was only a matter of time before the Academy's power core rebooted. When that happened, the warp gates leading to the White Griffin would open again, allowing the royal forces to restore order. Nalier needed to make sure that by then the stage was perfect. Not a single detail could be overlooked. She was way behind schedule, and the time at her disposal was quickly running out. Blinking consumed a lot of mana, but it was nothing compared to Final Sunset. She had already used Invigoration a lot of times. To heal from the poison, from the damage she had exchanged with Lith, and lastly from Farg. She needed to eat and rest soon, otherwise she was bound to collapse. The raw amount of mana she was handling put a heavy burden on her body. Lith was in her same boat, but his situation was even worse. His body had still to fully recover after he consumed so much life force to save Protector. To make things worse, he had spent the last night being tortured, and his core was weaker than Nalier's to begin with. Lith timed his blinks with extreme precision, leaving behind darkness blasts whenever Nalier closed in. Another weak spot of her tactic that he had found was that Blink's dimensional door would always appear very close to the mage. It meant that a huge part of the sphere Final Sunset created was temporarily cut off until the spell reformed it. By leaving his spells near Nalier's exit points, Lith was sure he was chipping her strength bit by bit. Even with Solas's help, it was still a mammoth task. Damn, if it keeps up like this, I'm bound to lose. She knows even true dimensional magic, so while she can use Invigoration, I'm forced to keep moving to avoid getting incinerated and prepping my traps. Any idea, Solus? None. She snarled. We can't leave the sword in front of the exit point. She always keeps a fire spike in front of her before blinking. The sword would be thrown away, and I would take heavy damage. Lith nodded. He preferred to attempt to escape, rather than putting Solus's life to risk. I can't believe there is only us fighting. Where is everyone? For the first time since he started the academy, Lith wished for his companions to be by his side. He needed only an opening to turntables, but until he was alone, Nailier could focus on him. She was doing a damn fine job getting closer and closer. In a corner of his mind, Lith was afraid he had failed to prevent the vision from coming true. Another exit point appeared in front of him. Lith was about to leave another darkness bomb when Solus warned him. Behind you. Thanks to being temporarily fused, he could actually use all of Solus's senses as his own. The warning was unnecessary. She did it only out of habit. A second exit point was forming at his back almost at the same time. Lith had no idea which was the real one. If he picked the wrong direction to blink, it would have been like throwing himself in the maws of the beast. Darkness-imbued flames came out from both dimensional doors at the same time, engulfing both ends of the corridors without leaving him no way out. FCK, that's not blink. She actually opened 2 warp steps at once. How powerful is she? Lith inwardly cursed while their minds were spinning at top gear for a solution. Alas, there was none. His line of sight was blocked by the flames, and there was no one alive and close enough he could use as a benchmark for blinking. At least until Solus's mana sense spotted human figures closing in. They were still far. Blinking there was a big risk. The dimensional jump would take a huge toll on him, and Lith could find himself surrounded by Nailier's puppets before having the time to react. In for a penny, in for a pound. Maybe dead always beats dead as a doornail. Lith used most of his remaining energies for the farthest blink he had ever attempted. Bending the fake spell limits put a huge strain on his mana and willpower, almost making him faint from the extortion. Luckily, he found himself among friends. To find Nailier, the Urnas had moved towards the battle that produced the most noise. They had encountered and neutralized a few professors before spotting Lith from a distance. Beware of her. Lith was wheezing. He was almost out of breath. The fresh air rejuvenated his lungs and reminded him how bad his throat was after being so close to a miniature sun for too long. She can silently cast any spell, he said while looking Floria in the eyes. Seeing her alive made him happy beyond what words could express. Not seeing the other 3 sent a cold shiver down his spine. Hence he warned his new allies at once. Lith was risking to expose part of his secrets, but if he didn't, they wouldn't last long, and neither would he. Just like the Wyvern, Nailier was an opponent he couldn't face alone. The gap between the two of them was too big. Floria was brimming with joy too. She was starting to fear it was too late. That just like Uriel, Lith was lost to her. The relief she noticed when their eyes met told Floria how worried about her he had been. Journey and Orion were surprised by finding him in such good shape after fighting an Academy's professor. Normally, they would consider his words just a bunch of nonsense coming from a traumatized student. An enemy capable of perfect silent casting outside first magic was more than unbelievable. It was something out of a nightmare. Yet they knew Lith better. Even if what he said was absurd, it had to be the truth. Thanks, kid. Don't worry too much. In such an enclosed space, most of her war mage spells are useless. Also, mage knights are the natural counter to battle mages, and I'm a spell breaker, and a mage experienced at killing other mages. Orion didn't believe much in his own words. Hunting down mages usually required a team of professionals, while his party was formed by 2 students and a non-mage. As much as a formidable opponent journey was, she needed to get close first. Drink potions, Lith said to protect them from Nailier's first magic. He could see she had spotted them, and he had barely regained 2 invigoration breaths worth of energy. Thanks, but it's not our first job, Lith. The Urnas gulped down an oddly colored potion each. Lith could see their bodies brimming with mana. Orion unsheathed his sword while his free hand composed the signs for a Tier 5 spell at unbelievable speed. He had recognized Final Sunset's dark flames and knew how to stop it. Chapter 319. Nalier walked slowly towards them, cursing at her bad luck. Quilla had failed. Constable Ernest was still alive. In the face of so many opponents, Blink was a liability. Nalier needed to save as much of her strength as she could to make sure they couldn't escape. Orion completed his spell. He conjured 5 shields made of ice, each one almost as big as the corridor was wide, that converged on Nalier from above and all the 4 sides. Fighting fire with ice is beyond dumb. Nalier thought, as long as I have mana, I can fuel my flames, melting his toys way before they can harm me. Much to her surprise, the shield's aim wasn't to hit. A Mage Knight was mostly a defender. They would attack only at close quarters once the enemy left them no choice. The shields grew in size and thickness according to Orion will. Their edges merged, keeping themselves away from the Final Sunset spell's core while creating an airtight space. It was Orion's personal spell, Sealing Cube. Nalier's flames roared, trying to consume the ice restricting them, only to disappear into nothingness. The stronger the fire, the more air it consumes. Orion thought, take away the air and a fire mage becomes helpless. Final Sunset failing her shocked Nalier, but not as much as finding herself suddenly gasping for air. The oxygen inside the cube wasn't even enough to sustain a candle, let alone the deep breaths invigoration required. Her vision became blurry, but she managed to activate the powers of her iron glove again, shattering her prison with a series of powerful shockwaves. Her freedom came at a heavy price, making it a hollow victory. All the mana she had poured in Final Sunset was lost, invigoration was broken, and she was coming dangerously close to exhausting her magical equipment. No matter how powerful the mana crystals were, they still needed some time to recharge, and Nalier had been forced using the non-stop. To make things worse, Orion had devised Sealing Cube to implode rather than explode when subjected to extreme vibrations. Air and fire were the natural counters to ice, so he had made them their own worst enemy. Nalier screamed in pain. Her body was pierced by countless ice shards, bleeding profusely. There was only so much damage her professor robe could block. She activated her sword again, releasing a flurry of lightning to buy some time and recover. Journey had seen countless corner magicians and outlived them all. As soon as she recognized the crackling sound, she struck 4 of her needles in the 4 corners of the corridor, channeling her own air magic inside them. The needles were indeed one of Orion's best works. They acted as lightning rods, turning Nalier's desperation move into a fool's errand. The electricity was safely grounded, allowing Orion to cast his next spell, while Floria took the offensive. She charged forward, keeping the enemy's attention on herself to buy her father the time he needed. Nalier was still catching her breath. Her spell wasn't ready yet. She moved her blade, pretending she was going to execute a horizontal slash, while she used the momentum from her spin to lunge forward with her sword, adding it to the boost air and fire fusion granted her. Floria's swordsmanship was better, allowing her to read the enemy feint and dodge the blade by a hair, turning her body so that her back was against Nalier's chest. Floria's right arm wrapped around Nalier's, locking it in place. Floria switched her blade to her left hand, cutting off Nalier's right hand in one fluid movement. The agony didn't stop the traitorous professor from striking her with the iron glove in the back with the strength of a charging bull. Floria was sent flying for several meters. She managed to remain conscious only thanks to her willpower and the powerful potion she had ingested earlier. Orion and Journey were flabbergasted when they saw Nalier's severed hand go back into place, reattaching itself like nothing had happened. Lith knew that it was thanks to spirit magic and invigoration, just like he knew that her hand was far from being really useful. He had almost regained enough strength for a final attack. Journey rushed towards Nalier, fast enough to allow her to run on the sidewall, while her needles returned to her hand on their own. They assembled together to the rest of the set, shape-shifting into a spear. Journey wasn't a mage. She needed all the range advantage she could get to keep enough distance to predict and evade the enemy's spells. She lunged it at Nalir's eye, to take her out in one blow. Nalir didn't have enough strength in her left arm, so she was forced to use spirit magic to support her blade and deflect the attack. Floria used that moment of distraction to blink behind her back. Her blade easily pierced through the professor robe and her hardened skin alike. Nalir managed to dodge at the last second, turning a fatal blow to the heart to one at her shoulder. Her right hand was still useless, her left arm fell limp, but she was still alive. She roared in fury, unleashing a Tier 5 spell, while Orion did the same. Nalir's Thunderdome was capable of trapping the surrounding enemies into a thick cover of lightning-imbued ice. Unlike a normal thunder, it couldn't be avoided and continued to inflict damage until all the ice wasn't disposed of. The cold surface formed a closed circuit that would allow the electricity to strike over and over until the enemy wasn't turned into charcoal. Orion's nether seal was an hexaelemental sphere that enveloped the opponent, greatly reducing the area of effect of their spells. It required a precise timing and concentration. It was a static spell, hence if cast too soon the enemy could simply move to avoid it. Too late, and it would be useless. That was the reason Orion didn't cast it even after completing the chant. He had only one chance and had to make it count. Nether Seal blocked Thunderdome, restricting it to barely 1 meter radius. Journey and Floria needed a single backstep to get to safety. Why don't you just die? Nalir felt she was going insane, as in even more than she already was. Chapter 320. Never before someone had fought his battles. In all his 3 lives, Derek McCoy, a.k.a. Lith, had always been on the front lines, be it to protect his brother Carl from his father or working his ass off to give his sister some meat and bread. Sitting limply in a corner was a new experience for him. It moved something inside the rotten heart of his. In a way, the Urnas were the family he had always dreamed to have when he was a little child. Super-powered beings that fought the bad guys together, no matter the odds. Spectating their battle almost made him feel like he had found somewhere he belonged. Almost. What really amazed him was how quickly everything was happening. He and Solus barely had the time to appreciate Orion's strategic prowess, Journey's amazing reaction speed, or Floria's swordsmanship that the combat had already shifted from one side to another. FCK. In those damn action movies, the actors dance with bad guys for minutes, while I only got 4 breaths worth of energy since the fighting started. Lith knew that in such a short time frame, Nalir couldn't have lost much of her strength. She was awakened with a lot of mana and a deranged mind. He knew all too well what kind of nightmare she could unleash if she was given the slightest chance. Lith knew because he was one as well. Why don't you just die? Nalir's scream was his cue. That and the blue aura that enveloped her body like a blazing flame. Lith quickly stood up, weaving several spells at once while imbuing the gatekeeper with part of his strength. He was ready, yet he didn't move. Orion had reminded him of the importance of timing and precision against a superior opponent. Instead of charging blindly like a bull, Lith chose to wait for his opportunity to appear. They had the situation under control, so he kept chanting while using Solus's senses to not miss a single detail. The information she could get by spending her mana was overwhelming. The slight alteration in the room temperature, the mana density, and even things like neural pathways flaring up whenever someone was about to do something. Lith had no idea what most of it meant, and neither did Solus. The only thing he was certain of was that if they weren't one, with Solus acting both as a source and as a filter, all that information would have burned his brain. Nalir tried to snap Journey's neck with spirit magic, but the mana running through her veins thanks to the potion reduced the pressure to an itch. Cursing Constable Urnas once again, Nalir unleashed a spirit magic blast by making her aura detonate. It didn't inflict damage. It was just a very strong push. Yet being invisible, it took Journey and Floria by surprise, giving Nalir a moment to catch her breath. Or at least so she hoped. Lith was already in front of her, releasing 5 different Tier 3 spells, each one aimed at a different body part. Nailier was still weaving her next spell while drawing a deep breath. She had no time to move, nor hidden card to play. She used spirit magic on herself, moving her body as a puppet and raising her left arm in the nick of time. The iron glove emitted another series of shockwaves, blasting away Litha's spells before proceeding to do the same with him. Nailier realized too late that a similar thing had happened earlier. Lith falling for the same trick twice was unlikely. Indeed it was. Lith released his sixth spell, conjuring a concave ice wall in front of himself. It was just a regular ice wall with a different shape, but Lith hoped it would be enough. Orion had shown him how the shockwaves were just sound. Litha's plan was to weaken them with the 5 spells first, and then bounce them back to the cinder with the thick ice wall reinforced by Solas's spirit magic. It was an improvised spell born out of sudden inspiration, so even when it only partially succeeded, Lith still considered it a success. The wall reflected only half of the shockwave's strength, while the other half struck Lith. Both the awakened ones were sent flying, but only one of them had allies. The hit broke Nailier's focus, disrupting her spell and breathing technique alike. Floria didn't miss the opportunity. She activated Blast Guard, a Mage Knight Tier 4 spell that burned Nailier's back, bouncing her toward Journey like a pinball. Journey took out her Gatekeeper short sword, imbuing it with air magic to enhance its edge. Even while moving at high speed, Nailier managed to alter her trajectory with spirit magic enough to avoid Journey chopping off her head. Lady Erna's reacted in time, adjusting the angle of her slash, opening a deep cut in Nailier's side as consolation prize. Nailier gritted her teeth, holding back tears of desperation. If I'm really going to die, I will take you all down with me, she thought. When is he going to transform? Milea asked. Transform? The Guardians asked as one. Didn't you all come here to understand what he is? If there isn't going to be a world tribulation, what's the point of staying here? Kid, if every time someone fights for their life a world tribulation started, there would be only Guardians left alive on Mogar. Salar guffawed. We can study him from this distance, even without a tribulation. Ligain offered her his hand, which Milea took without hesitation. Thanks to that contact, she was able to share the Guardian soul vision. It showed her the real nature of things. The Guardians appeared in their true forms, humongous mass of power in the form of a griffin, a phoenix, and a dragon. Each one of them was so big their heads seemed to reach the sky and their feet Mogar's core. The White Griffin Academy looked like a kneeling white knight, wounded all over. Their pristine armor was tainted by the red of blood and the black of death. Lith was fully transformed in her eyes, and so was Nailier. He was now over 2 meters tall, 7 feet, and covered by black scales, the tip of which was bright red from the scorching heat that coursed through them. 2 curved horns resided on his featureless head, together with 7 yellow eyes, and a maw opened in a cruel smile that revealed the fire burning within. 2 pairs of upside-down membranous wings came out of his back, as well as a long tail ending in several bone blades. Nailier looked like herself, but she was wearing a long white tunic dirty with blood and mud. Her hair moved like she was in the middle of a storm. Her eye sockets were empty black holes, shedding tears of blood while her mouth was wide open in an eternal silent scream. Teacher, he really looks like one of your humanoid forms, but her, isn't that a banshee? Is she going to evolve into an undead guardian? Milea had no other explanation to such a vision. Orion and Floria appeared no different from their human form, while Journey's skin appeared gray. Blood was constantly dripping from her hands. Chapter 3:21. Indeed, but at this point of his evolution, it's too early to tell. Ligain explained. Most of those traits are common in reptile guardians. He may become a dragon, a basilisk, a leviathan, or maybe something new entirely. As for her, she hasn't undergone a single tribulation. What you see is a lost soul drove mad by pain. Her appearance means that her grudge is so deep, not even death can stop it. That woman is likely to turn into an undead if her body isn't cleanly disposed of. Nailier tumbled on the floor with Journey in hot pursuit. Her blade followed Nailier's major arteries' every movement, ready to strike as soon as she was close enough. Nailier suddenly blinked, but Journey was expecting such a move. She sidestepped while executing a circle slash, putting her back against the wall and hitting the space 180 degrees around her at the same time. Yet Nailier wasn't there. She appeared in front of a stunned Orion, hitting him squarely on the jaw with the iron gauntlet. He didn't lose consciousness, but he would be incapacitated for a few seconds, more than enough to put an end to the fight. She blinked again, a split second before Lith could exploit the opening at her back. He cursed his lack of true dimensional magic, which made him slower than Nailier while using a healing spell on Orion, hastening his recovery. Nailier blinked back to Journey, a knife dripping poison in the left hand and the sword in the right one. Normally, Lith would have admired her mastery of spirit magic, which allowed Nailier to move even better than when the burden on her body had to be enormous, and so the pain. Yet she endured it like it was nothing. The knife was all Lith needed to set his course of action. He interrupted the healing and prepared the next spell as fast as he could. Nailier clashed with Journey for a split second, disappearing again just to reappear behind Floria's back with her knife already lunging forward. Instead of Floria's flesh, the knife bit Lith's stone gauntlet, making sparks but no damage. Lith had switched with Floria at the last second, headbutting Nailier in the nose before she could recover from the surprise and blink again. The nose broke, filling Nailier's eyes with tears and her mouth with blood, making it difficult for her to breathe. Lith slashed downwards while holding the gatekeeper with both hands, aiming for her neck. She used her own blade to block, reinforcing her weakened arms with spirit magic. Lith followed suit. The gatekeeper was already infused with great elemental energies, and now was boosted by Lith's enhanced body, fusion, and spirit magic, while Nailier's sword was at its weakest. The blade shattered on impact, still exerting enough resistance to deflect the hit, but not enough to prevent Lith to adjust the trajectory and cut Nailier's left arm. Before the glove could reach the ground and emit a metallic clang, Lith spun on himself to exploit his own momentum. The gatekeeper rose and fell again, this time chopping Nailier diagonally from the right shoulder to the left hip. Lith had the sword reduce its size, short enough to decapitate her and stab her heart in a single fluid motion. The energies coursing through the blade consumed the corpse like fire burning dried grass until nothing remained. "Does that qualify as clean disposal?" Milea asked. "It surely does." Tyrus nodded. Nailier's death marked the end of the hostilities inside the White Griffin. Once the Master Ring lost her imprint, it turned to dust, and so did all the slave items. It was one of Hatorn's safety features to leave behind no traces after the deed was done. Lith fell on his knees. The rushed switch and the use of spirit magic to overcome his limits had drained him of any strength. Floria helped him to get up. His legs were too shaky to sustain Lith anymore. The gauntlet disappeared. With Nailier's death, the bond was back to its usual strength. Solus went back being a ring, her core reverting to yellow, just as Lith's turned from bright cyan to just cyan. As he gasped for air, feeling his arms as heavy as lead, his mind was once again assaulted by the vision. This time the images didn't fade away. Every single one of them shattered like broken glass. The academy burning, Floria's death, as well as Lith's family slaughter. Everything crumbled, replaced by a blank slate. Lith and Solus instinctively knew it was because the threat was over. Lith's soul was finally at rest, and the future unknown as it was supposed to be. What you did was crazy dangerous. Floria was still terrified. How did you know where she would reappear and the angle of strike? One mistake, and she would have stabbed you instead. The vision. Lith replied. I replayed in my mind the part where you got stabbed so many times I could follow her blade with my eyes closed. It was far from a romantic phrase, yet Floria felt her heart flutter. Where are the others? Lith asked. They are safe. Floria chose her words carefully, trying to hide the pain, gripping her voice the best that she could. Her heart sank as soon as the adrenaline from the battle started to fade away. Floria was ridden by guilt for her choice of putting her mother above her friend's life. Lith didn't miss her distress. The cheeks that were just turning red were now pale. "What happened?" he asked. Orion could see his daughter struggling to find the words and stepped forward to take the burden off her shoulders. "Don't." Journey stopped him. "I know that it's painful, but she has to live with it. The sooner she faces reality, the better. We can't protect her forever." Orion held his wife's hand tight, nodding. He didn't like Lith one bit. Orion had read his personal file, watched all the recordings related to him, and found his evaluation accurate. Yet after all he did for Orion's little flower during Balkir's attack, after seeing Lith in action, spitting blood to protect his family, Orion had come to respect Lith. He treated Floria right and made her happy as Orion had never seen her before. He couldn't ask for more, not without feeling a sadistic hypocrite. Orion couldn't stand the thought that just after being reunited, such a revelation could split them apart forever. Floria led Lith to a corner, making him sit before telling him the whole story. Her voice was shaky, the pain and regret palpable, yet she managed not to cry. Lith said nothing. His mind believed her. Floria would never pull such a cruel joke on him. His heart, however, was struck in denial. "Can I see his body?" Lith had managed to prevent the vision from coming true, yet it felt a hollow victory to him. "I'm sorry. I'm too weak to open warp steps right now." Floria shook her head. "I'm so sorry. I'm always so useless." Tears started to streak from her eyes. "No, you are not." Lith forced himself to stand up, hugging her and letting Floria bury her head on his shoulder. "It's all my fault," she sobbed, searching for his warmth. "If that's true, then I'm as responsible for Uriel's death as you are. If only I cared for him a bit more, then maybe my vision would have shown us his fate too. Maybe his father would have allowed him to stay home." Chapter 322. How can it be your fault? Floria raised her head, looking Lith in the eyes. "You warned us multiple times. You wanted us to stay away from the academy. How can it be your fault?" Lith took her face between his hands, caressing her cheeks with his thumbs. "You did all you could in an impossible situation. In your shoes, I would have done the same thing. We always give priority to those we love the most. My vision is a perfect example of it. I don't know about you two, but I'm dead tired. Taking down crazy professors is way harder than I imagined." Journey sat down, leaning her back against the wall and dragging Orion to her side. She was happy the kids were having a moment, but she couldn't allow them to keep beating themselves up. They were clearly exhausted, both mentally and physically. Floria has too much on her plate already. Uriel's death, killing humans for the first time, spectating all the horrors humans inflict on their own kind. If she doesn't rest a bit, when a nervous breakdown hits her, it could be fatal. Journey knew her daughter well. It wasn't a matter of if, the only variable was when. Floria followed suit. There was nothing she wanted to say or hear anymore. She was so tired that words, like violence, could only cause her more pain. Floria and Lith fell asleep almost immediately, leaning against each other while clenching their hands like they were a lifeline. Journey looked at them with a tender expression, before turning to Orion with her trademark, "I told you so" grin. He snores. It was all he could think about for a snarky reply. "And so does she. They make a fine tune nonetheless." Journey rebuked. "Look, I'm too tired to play this game." Orion sighed. "Why don't we follow their lead and get a little shut-eye?" "Because we're the adults, and because we don't know if Nailier had associates or a backup plan. I'm not lowering my guard until we are back home." Tyrus appeared next to Amalafarg, bringing her back to her peak condition with a simple touch. She woke up abruptly. A gatekeeper longsword appeared in her hand while she looked around for the enemy. "I hope you have learned your lesson," Tyrus said with a gentle smile. "I hope everyone will." She sighed, looking at Billow and Thorman still laying on the ground, alive but unconscious. What happened? How could she recover like that? Farg was shocked. She was still a rookie in the corpse. She never expected for natural awakened to be so different from the artificial ones. Awakening, it's the first step towards becoming one with Mogr. She was a much lesser version of Guardian, but still had access to an almost endless supply of mana. Tyrus's explanation was cryptic on purpose. She wanted Farg to understand her limits without giving her any hints about the awakening process. Tyrus had learned from experience that power couldn't be gifted recklessly. It had to be earned. What? Farg felt her heart skip a beat, promising herself that from that moment onwards, she would always put down an unknown enemy unless ordered otherwise. Almost. Tyrus repeated herself. Follow me. There's still much I have to teach you before the academy starts again. Journey's worries turn out to be groundless. Nothing happened for several minutes, until the academy's power core turned back online. It allowed the members of the army to cross the warp gate and secure the place. Thanks to the Royal Override Code, Journey could temporarily turn off the arrays, making it possible for Floria to bring Freya and Quilla back. Freya was barely able to walk, while Quilla was still out cold. Journey moved them all to the White Griffin Hospital with a warp steps. For the first time in its history, the hospital was understaffed and unprepared to handle an emergency of such a scale. There wasn't a single free spot. Its wings, usually so orderly and quiet, were now a chaotic mess. Manohar managed to check them up, marking Quilla as the only one in need of urgent medical attention. After stabilizing her condition, he immediately returned to his most severe cases. Journey had let them sleep until the whole academy was safe again, so Lith had regained a part of his strength. My body is still battered. Even with invigoration, I can barely access to 60% of my full power. It's still much better than when I saved Protector. Uriel's body is inside a dimensional amulet, so there isn't much hope. If there is even a ghost of a chance, I must give it a try. I wish I knew how to contact Scarlet. Lith sighed. The Lord of the Forest had saved him and Protector in the past. Her expertise with true magic was unparalleled. Freya took out Uriel's corpse from her dimensional amulet, laying it on a bed. Lith used invigoration together with all the diagnostic spells he knew. Nothing worked. There was no life force, no mana core, nothing he could rejuvenate. He's really dead. Lith shook his head. He covered Uriel's corpse with a sheet, hiding the gaping wound that lesser healing magic had failed to treat. The surviving members of the group hugged each other, sharing their pain. All hope was lost. The only thing left to do for them was grieving. The following days were hectic, at least for the Royals and the staff of the White Griffin Academy. Nailier's contingency plan consisted in releasing to the public all the video recordings and documents connecting many of the most powerful noble households to Archmage Lockhart. They revealed their plans for the Civil War, proving the involvement of many influential nobles in funding Haytorn's work and providing her the necessary materials to realize the improved slave items. Everything had to be double-checked, since the source of the evidence was still a traitorous mass murder. The detailed financial records and shipments tracking documents made it easy for the royal constables to verify the information. The Crown was finally able to purge many of the most dangerous elements of the court, stripping their families of a considerable portion of their authority. In any other circumstances, the nobles would have rebelled, but they were caught in a perfect storm. The Crown suppressed their finances, the army and the Mage Association ostracized their members, while commoners and the new magical bloodlines were just expecting the nobles to give them an excuse to burn them at the stakes. Too many had died in a single day. The blame fell on them like the axe of the executioner, crippling the noble households. 1/4 of the White Griffin students and professors were dead or mentally scarred to the point of being barely functional. Most of the survivors among the slave items bearers were quarantined, waiting to be interrogated. Nailier made me do it. Was too cheap an excuse. The documents proved that while some were truly victims, others were just perpetrators caught in their own scheme. Professor Duke Marth was promoted to the role of new headmaster. He was perfect for the role. Not too young nor too old, well-liked, brilliant in his field, and also a forge master. Chapter 323. Vaster and Rudd were deemed too old for the role, plus their love for ancient magical bloodlines was well known. It made them even more undesirable than they already were, even as simple professors. Their ties with many of the families implicated with the scandal made their positions precarious at best. Manohar was considered a visionary in the Healing Hearts, a true genius, or, to put it in less kind words, a complete nutjob. He was fickle and unreliable, not to mention his biography, was full of social blunders to the point of being universally considered an etiquette book about how not to behave. He resented the Crown judgment, but only until his first visit to Marth's new office. Just seeing how busy his schedule was and the amount of paperwork being headmaster involved, Manohar was tempted to taking another vacation. The Crown had no time to waste with him, so they literally chained Manohar to the academy, just to stay safe. Professor Wainmeyer was among the mentally and physically scarred. Regrowing her arm was easy, but the memories of all Nailier had made her do almost destroyed her. She was forced to take a sabbatical, receiving the best care and counseling the Griffin Kingdom could offer. Lith moved with his whole family to the Ernest household again. Even Rena and her husband were forced to relocate. Lith wouldn't let his sister and niece be further than his arm's reach. Uriel's loss wasn't devastating for him as losing Protector was. They had known each other for barely a year, and their relationship had been shallow until the fourth year's second exam. Still, Uriel was the first man Lith was almost ready to call a friend, someone he went through thick and thin together. Lith wasn't responsible in any way for his death, and not being present when it happened made it easier for him to feel detached. At least until Archmage Dyrus went to visit him. Lith's first impulse was to kick the man in the groin and beat him to death, an impulse he quickly suppressed. Velan Dyrus was guilty of being an uncaring father, but nothing more. Lith knew that just like after Protector's disappearance, his first instinct was to find someone to put the blame on. The visit was very brief. Lith could control his violent impulses, but his eyes were filled with scorn and reproach. Archmage Dyrus couldn't stand those eyes. They were identical to those that pierced his soul every time he was in front of a mirror. He remained only the time necessary to give Lith a small package. It was full of notebooks filled with Uriel's handwriting. They contained all the knowledge he had acquired about the impossible arrays, the results of his experiments, and his suggestions about how to further the research. Dyrus knew who to give them because on the first page of each of them was written in big letters, for Lith. He had found them once he opened his son's dimensional amulet after recovering his body. Velan had also found Uriel's diaries, discovering how painful his existence had been, how neglected he had felt, how despite having found a better family within the academy walls rather than inside his own household, Uriel was still ready to perform his duty. Uriel's love for his father and his people was greater than everything life had put him through. Velan Dyrus cried a lot reading his son's most private thoughts, finding himself more monstrous than any of those involved in Uriel's death. He had nurtured a future leader, a great mage, but at the same time, he had shown no care for the man destined to bear those pompous titles. Velan realized to have killed his own son multiple times over the years, always putting his own interests over Uriel's well-being. After Velan left, Lith made one of the biggest mistakes in his life. He put the notebooks inside Solaspedia, accessing at all of them at once. In between of his research notes, Uriel had also written all the things that he wanted to share with Lith. All the thoughts they never had the time to talk about because of the academy. Reading how Uriel had always considered him like a big brother and a true friend ripped Lith's soul to shreds. It made him understand how precious was their bond. He had moved to the Ernest household only because he knew that to overcome the grief before the academy started again, he needed all the help his family could give him. A noble household was the safest and most comfortable place for his purpose. Also, Floria needed him. Lith would never leave her alone while she was facing something even worse than Carl's death. At least Carl had died by the hand of a stranger, when Lith was already a grown, bitter, cold-hearted man. Floria was ridden by the guilt of having indirectly caused Uriel's death, of having killed mind-controlled students to defend her family. Freya was in an almost identical situation. The blood on Floria's hands was the same that was on hers. She had mindlessly obeyed to ease her own conscience. It was because of her incompetence that saving Journey took so long, causing Uriel's demise as well as that of many others. She had seen Lith healing much worse wounds in much less time. During Balkier's attack, he even treated Uriel and Floria at the same time. How could I bear my second place so proudly? Uriel was right. We are a fraud. I don't deserve my ranking, just like I don't deserve my friends. I'm an utter failure. I should have been the one dying. Were the thoughts haunting her? Actually, her second place was fully deserved. Freya's talent for healing magic was on par with Lith's. She just wasn't awakened. Quilla's life was still hanging on a thread. She was unable to eat, puking almost as soon as she ingested any kind of food. Someone had always to be by her side, to make sure she didn't harm herself. She would cry until exhaustion made her faint, unable to speak a word most of the time. Potions and the sharing of life force were the only things keeping her alive. At night, she would sleep with Orion and Journey by her side. It was the only moment she managed to truly rest, free from fits of hysteria. At his arrival, Lith thought nothing of them. To him, they were just Floria's accessories, something he would worry about in his spare time. Uriel's words changed his mind. Maybe they were nothing to him, but the opposite wasn't necessarily true. Lith had already lost an opportunity because, after the second exam, he had simply promoted his companions from strangers to fish in a tank. He never treated them as persons, only as something to feed and watch from time to time. A living screensaver, less than pets. As much as Lith found it unbelievable, there were actually people that really cared for him outside of his family. Yet he would never be able to recognize them if he didn't give them at least a chance before discarding them like trash. Uriel's death showed him that life was too short to worry about outliving those who would die of old age. They were the lucky ones. Chapter 324. The White Griffin Academy didn't stay closed for long, just a couple of weeks. During that time, Lith did all he could to help the three girls recover. Despite the traumatic events their daughters had gone through, the Ernest couple had a duty to uphold. They would be rarely at home, mostly for the meals and for the night. Sometimes one or both of them were forced to stay away for a day or more. They were the only surviving witnesses to not have any relationship with the Academy's politics, and also those who had put an end to Nailier's threat. They had to write multiple reports, confer with the royals, the council of the headmasters, and all the upper echelons involved in the administration of the country. The old and new noble families wanted someone to blame. Heads were going to roll before the storm would pass. Journey and Orion were the keystones in many ongoing high-profile trials, not only as witnesses, but also as a royal constable and a member of the Knights Guard, respectively. While the Queen's Court dealt with all the threats related to magic, the Knights Guard had a defensive role inside the Griffin Kingdom. They were tasked with protecting and assisting the royal constables during their investigations. It was a corps comprised only by forge masters and mage knights. Only a few, like Orion, were both, making them the cream of the crop. It has to be said that an academy wasn't the only way to learn a specialization. The army had the means and the knowledge to train its members. Unlike an academy, the process could take far more than 2 years, depending on the talent and the number of missions a guard had to take. Also, the candidate had to prove their worth beforehand the training began. Most of the members of the Knights Guards would start with only one specialization and learn the other over the years. During their absence, Lith took care of the three girls to the best of his abilities and with the help of his family. Alas, there wasn't much he could do. No words could ease their suffering. No simple gesture could make their trauma fade away. He could only stick by their side, not letting them hole up in their rooms. Only time could help. Lith was an expert on grieving and facing pain, but his methods couldn't be shared. Lith lacked the necessary empathy to connect with Floria or Freya. Killing the mind-controlled students didn't bother him in the least. He knew only one way to deal with his enemies and wasn't interested in the reason why they attacked him. As for Uriel's death, Lith regretted having missed the opportunity to know him better, to finally have a friend. He missed Uriel, but that was it. If I had to choose between Mom, one of my sisters, or even Floria and him, I would have done the same thing. I'm not a hypocrite. I'm aware that I didn't know Uriel well enough to care about him, and now I never will. Lith thought. Solus played a big part in his recovery, always reminding him of all the affection he had been showered with. Lith left Alina and Rena to take care of Quilla. They were the best moms he knew. In his mind, if they weren't able to give her the solace and compassion she needed, then no one could. Floria and Freya were easier to deal with. He made them follow the routine his own counselor gave Lith after Carl's death, waking them up at regular hours, forcing them to eat and spend time with those they loved. Everything to show them that pain was just a part of life, that no matter how dark their lives felt, they weren't alone. This stuff never worked for me, but it's worth a shot, he thought. The worst part for all of them was the night. Being alone in the dark, the girls couldn't stop their minds from being assaulted by bad memories, regrets, and hindsight. Lith was always by Floria's side, making sure that whenever she would wake up abruptly because of the nightmares, she would always find him right next to her. When the academy started again, Quilla wasn't in the condition to move. Like many other students, she received permission to stay home and recover. She would get back to the academy the following year or whenever she was ready. Lith, Freya, and Floria resumed their lives, drowning themselves into work to keep their anxiety at bay. Professors were now able to cross from one floor to another. There hadn't been enough time to find replacements for the fallen ones, so Ironhelm now taught forge mastering to both the 4th and the 5th year. With Linjos gone, after the last tragedy, Headmaster Marth decided to go back to written and spell-casting exams inside the academy, just like in the past. The students had got enough real-life experience in the last 2 years. Now they needed peace and quiet. The Civil War was no longer an issue, the traitor was gone, and when the anniversary came, Balkier didn't send any note. No one could believe to such luck, so they all made their children go back home and went into hiding for the following 3 days. Balkier didn't send a single undead, giving the Griffin Kingdom the first piece of good news after so much suffering. Lith, Freya, and Floria were inseparable during their days at the academy. The girls rarely left him alone, studying and eating together. Floria didn't leave his side even at night. Even though everything was clean like nothing bad had ever happened, seeing those corridors and all the common spaces still pierced her heart. It reminded her of Uriel, of all the blood spilled. Litha's warmth and affection were the only lines of defense she had against the despair that would grip her mind if left alone. The 5th year went by quickly. Lith never got out the academy, except for visiting Quilla, his dates with Floria, and going back to his family. First, he had to deliver his niece, Lyria, and later his little brother, Aaron. The final exams were easy for Lith Solispedia, made the written exams a walk in the park. Casting spells in a closed classroom in front of the professors didn't cause him any stress compared to Linjos's teaching methods. Before the results came out, Lith was once again summoned to the headmaster's office. This time there was no one beside Marth waiting for him. He seemed dead tired, but being his first year as headmaster, it was understandable. The pressure he was being subjected was nothing compared to Linjos's. The ancient noble household were not as overbearing as in the past. Balkier was missing, and not a single accident had occurred. Yet Headmaster Marth was still learning the ropes, and until all investigations and trials were over, it was his duty alone to take care of the Academy's power core. Lith sat in front of him, expecting the usual batch of bad news. The only time he had entered into a headmaster's office without someone getting royally pissed off was when Martianus Distar introduced him to Linjos. Chapter 325. I'm glad to see you have made a complete recovery. Your grades have not been affected in the least by what happened with Nalier. I wish I could say the same for the others. Marth sighed deeply. The White Griffin now not only had fewer students than any other academy, but also the lowest average in terms of grades. Despite using the old exam system, many students had yet to recover. The situation was so bad that the king had decreed the students of the White Griffin who failed their finals could attend the year a second time as a last chance. It was an unprecedented case in the Academy's history, but so was Nalier's scheme. I've called you here to congratulate you on your achievements. You are ranked first overall and in the light department too. Marth handed him a piece of paper that listed the students in ascending order according to their points value. Lith was ranked first with 14,456 points, Freya second with 12,486, and Floria third with 10,753. Lith was surprised seeing the gap between the top 3 scores, especially since Floria, with only one specialization, had run circles around the 4th ranked with her 8,731 points. Okay, if this is the off-the-record score, what will be the official one? Lith was angered at the thought the events of the 4th year were about to repeat themselves. Before giving Marth a piece of his mind, Lith wanted to understand his reasons and how he would be compensated. That's the official one. I didn't input it in the system yet, because I just received it too. Sorry for the misunderstanding. Marth handed him a gold griffin-shaped pin and a white moonstone griffin-shaped pin. Both had a 5 engraved on them. Seeing the gold pin reminded him of Uriel, making Lith's heart ache for a second. He wore them nonetheless, placing the pins right above his heart. What does the asterisk near my score mean, then? Lith asked. To avoid further embarrassment to the other students and academies, we have split your academic points from those you earn for sharing your spell. In light of its usefulness, the Council of the Headmasters has decided to value it 10,000 points. Lith almost couldn't believe his own ears. It had taken a long time to assess Lith's resonant spell's worth. Despite being a Tier 1 spell, it had made it possible to reduce the time needed for recovering the full use of a regrown limb from years to months. It was an invaluable tool, which allowed soldiers and mages alike to go from crippled to fit for duty faster than it had ever been thought possible. What do you mean with further embarrassment? Well, let's just say that our average sucks, but our 3rd ranker has scored more points than the 1st rankers of the other academies. Marth replied with a smirk on his face. Now, I need to know if you're going to participate to the ceremonial graduation tourney. No, thank you. Only at the end of the 5th year, there would be a friendly competition among the students to demonstrate their battle prowess. Linjo's system made it obsolete, but it was still part of the academy customs. Usually, the student ranked first would also be the winner of the tourney. For a lower-ranked student to win the competition meant a huge boost in prestige for his family. Are you sure? Marth asked. It will not give you any points, but whatever you decide to do in the future, it could help you in your career. Absolutely. Lith nodded. I have beaten all old noble households in the rankings. Winning the tourney would bring me only troubles. I think it's better to leave them a chance to prove themselves and restore their honor. Besides, I survived a Valor, a Wyvern, and even Nailier. I know I can beat any student of the White Griffin, and that's enough for me. I don't have to prove myself anymore. That's great to hear. The headmaster could finally sigh in relief. Thank the gods Lith isn't another self-absorbed as whole. It's the best political choice he could make. Giving face to the noble households will make things easier for the Academy and the Royals both. They will be really pleased when I'll report them this conversation. He thought. It also brings us to the next topic. Marth handed him another pin. This one was shaped like Silverwing's hexagram, but the lines connecting the 6 dots were depicted as broken in multiple points. Professor Farg, Constable Ernaz, and Guard Ernaz all testified your valor as a fighter against Nailier. The Crown has decided to make you an honorary member of the Spellbreaker Order as a reward. Spellbreakers were mages tasked with disposing of criminal practitioners of the mystical arts. According to what Farg explained to him at the beginning of the 5th year, even becoming an honorary one was a big deal. It meant not only social prestige, but also represented how much the Crown trusted him. I also have a job proposal for you that should benefit both of us. Marth steepled his fingers. Everything he set up to that point was in preparation for this moment. Lith wore the 3rd pin too, nodding. As you know, the White Griffin is short-staffed. We lost 1/4 of our instructors. Finding so many talented and trustworthy professors in such little time is not easy. Since you are still 2 years away from becoming an adult, I thought you could be interested in a position as assistant professor. You are too young and lack the experience to be a professor, but your foundations are solid. We could use someone like you to cover for the basic lessons. It would give you a place to stay, a good income, and merits. If you accept, the Mage Association will take you as a member without the usual procedure. What about my sister? Lith had already mentioned to him Tista wanted to attend the White Griffin Academy. She can take the test. You have my word our judgment will be fair, but nothing more. We care only for talent. Admitting Tista just to have her fail at the 1st trimester would be a waste of our and her time both. Marth replied. Lith pondered for a second about the answer. With her bright green core, Tista will be among the weakest students, but since she is only interested in the healing specialization, she should be fine. Also, if she is really going to awaken, this way I can keep an eye on her and make sure Tista doesn't get into trouble. Lith thought. Working for the Academy also means unlimited funds and materials for my research. Plus, all the time, I need to keep copying magic books. It's an offer I can't refuse. When Lith accepted, Marth felt a huge burden lifted from his shoulders. Having Lith was a huge morale boost for the White Griffin Academy. Nailier had destroyed its reputation, and now many families were considering to transfer their children to more safe institutions. Having the youngest spellbreaker of the kingdom among their ranks, who also happened to be considered the next god of healing, was just what the White Griffin's public relations needed. Lith left the headmaster's office and went to give the good news to his companions and family. It seemed they would soon be invited to the royal palace for a gala.